Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku and Momo Were Geniuses? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. When one talked about Yaoyorozu Momo, one could not define her with a single word. She had several virtues, being diligent, courteous, elegant, kind, and humble, with no flaws. First in her class and outstanding intellectually, one would think that women like her would be ambitious and enterprising, the kind who would put their work or, in her case, their grades first and have no time for friendships, let alone relationships. However, here she was, having an intense session of kissing and caressing in her very classroom. Everything said before about her seemed to be nothing more than a vile lie because she was panting and eager to feel her lover more, who had a libido just as high as hers. And who is the cause of the applied Yaoyorozu being in such a state of ecstasy? Maybe Kirishima with his manly attitude? Maybe Todoroki, the not-so-secret love of this one? Demons. It could even be Bakugo with its explosive but passionate attitude. None of them. The boy who had Yaoyorozu letting out small moans of pleasure was Izuku Midoriya himself. Amazing, isn't it? The shyest, quietest boy in the class is supporting Yaoyorozu on Aizawa-sensei's desk while stroking Aizawa-sensei's legs and, literally, devouring his classmates' lips. You may wonder two companions who had hardly ever spoken and who had rarely exchanged a word. Well, everything has an explanation and nothing is impossible. You just have to take a look back. A long time ago. It's not that this type of activity bothers me, said the hairy woman tiredly, but why always in my room? He said sadly when he saw how his bedroom was filled with bags of chips and sweets. It was one of the typical sleepovers that the girls of Class 1A had every weekend. The black-haired woman's classmates were chatting animatedly among themselves. The reason why these sleepovers had become something established for every Friday was the stress that the academy gave them every day in the physical and mental aspect, leaving them fatigued not only for them. The boys usually shared a pizza and drank late, but their gatherings weren't as sacred as the sleepovers the girls held. Because your bed is huge, Ashido replied, sounding obvious. I'm seriously thinking about making it smaller, said the black-haired woman. I don't see what's the problem if we always help you clean up at the end, Hagakure said cheerfully. We help sounds like a lot to me, Kyoka spoke. Azui, Uraraka, and I are the ones who stay to clean up, said the violet-haired woman honestly. An aura of grief covered Ashido and Hagakure as the others giggled. Even though Yaoyorozu complained about the fact that they always use her room, she always ended up enjoying and even treasured these moments that she shared with her teammates. Taking a quick look at her room, she was not surprised to see each of her friends in their place. Kyoka was playing with her bass sitting on her desk, Hagakure and Ashido at the bottom of the bed, Azui and Uraraka each sitting on the handsome side of the middle of the bed, and last was her sitting in a chair instead of on her own bed. Changing the subject, Ashido spoke, calling the attention of all those present. Now that we won't have to worry about villains 24 hours a day, he said innocently. It had been over a year since the villains had ceased to be a real danger to the entire world, and as always, the flashy students of Class 1A were involved. In those times, young aspiring heroes did not have a break to rest. During those times, one only had to worry about improving and advancing. We can behave like normal teenagers, said the hairy girl cheerfully, raising her arms in the air with emotion. None of them said anything for a few seconds. Even Kyoka's bass stopped playing at her partner's words. Then that means that Hagakure broke the ice. Can we be in a courtship? I ask innocently. Yaoyorozu, Uraraka, and Kyoka had a nervous tick. Not only that, Ashido continued, we are of legal age now. Think about the number of activities we are allowed to do. She smiled enthusiastically. In one thing, if he is right, Yaoyorozu said mentally, Class 1A was no longer seen in any way as children. Even in their first year, certain classmates were already seen as heroes of high caliber. That was with respect to the ethical and moral side. However, in the physical aspect, they were no longer considered children either. Well, it's normal that at our age we look for new experiences, Azui said interestedly. Are you on his side? Kyoka spoke surprised, out of tune with her bass at the same time. We can't avoid our nature, replied the expressionless, black-haired woman calmly. It's true, but I try to refute Yaoyorozu. You already heard Azui? Ashido interrupted him. It's totally natural. The hairy one winked at her. Natural but inappropriate. Uraraka spoke, her cheeks dyed red. I agree with Uraraka, Yaoyorozu said firmly. As future aspiring heroines, our vision must be one and without distractions. She sounded determined. Don't worry. The decision is up to each one of us after all. Ashido spoke down. I always wanted to have a high school relationship, Hagakure said excitedly. And now is our chance. Ashido hugged him on the shoulders. The topic we will talk about tonight will be, I speak dramatically. Yaoyorozu swallowed hard. With a slight blush, she stood firm as the future heroine she would be in the future. A song could not get her out of her boxes, or was it? Time skip. It's stupid, said the haired woman irritably, drinking her mojito in one gulp, hoping that the cold drink will calm the intense heat she was going through. Let's drink even more. I shout happily and drunk, Uraraka. I just want to say that you are all like a family to me. I'm sorry. Tokoyami began to cry, as did his partner. He was totally out of his mind thanks to alcohol. A large circle was formed to comfort the sobbing Fumikage. The small circle was composed more of boys than girls, except for Uraraka. Do you want one more glass? Sato asked the black-haired woman, who was acting as a bartender. Thank you, Sato. Yaoyorozu handed him his glass. You look worried. Don't you want a dessert to relax? The boy asked with a smile and a twinkle in his eyes. I'm fine, it's nothing. Feigned a smile. The black-haired woman, they're delicious, by the way. She pointed to her drink. You know what else is delicious, said a voice behind the black-haired woman. Your body, Mineta began to drool. Yes, I think I'll go sit down for a while. Yaoyorozu walked away from the bar. 10 more minutes and then to bed, said the black-haired woman mentally, sighing as she took a seat in one of the armchairs in the living room. To make a long story short, exam week was over for Class 1A, so they would have a vacation for a while, and thanks to Kaminari and Ashido, the entire class was partying in the high school dorms. Of course, first they had to make some preparations, put a minibar, sandwiches, drinks, and the most important one, make sure Ida keeps her mouth shut. When night came, no one would think that things could get so out of control. Thank heaven that without their quirks, thought the black-haired woman. Ida seems to be about to collapse in a drinking competition with Kirishima and Bakugu. He fell unconscious in the first round. Kaminari and Kyoka acting very affectionate and romantic in one of the armchairs in front of Yaoyorozu, Azui, Kuda, and Aoyama in a corner chatting the most normal. There was the group of inseparable friends composed of Shuji, Shiro, and Ojiro who were comforting the sensitive Fumikage, Ashido, and Hagakure, who were a little bitten, flirting with Todoroki, who was sitting to the right of her. Despite the feeling she felt for the boy, it was another reason why she felt irritated. Uraraka please. I try to push the girl Izuku away a little. Don't give me a drink. Nerves in her voice. Hick, I just want a kiss. The brunette shouted annoy, leaning even more on the boy's chest to steal a kiss from him. Point one and nothing more. Hick, she demanded. I think you shouldn't drink Uraraka anymore. I try to take away the drink that was holding another. I'll stop drinking for one of these. The brunette pointed to her lips. The red-haired man laughed nervously, not knowing what else to do. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous, thought the black-haired woman, taking a sip of her drink. They had started talking and getting to know each other only 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. The hairy girl screamed internally, because only he had that effect on her? The other boys in his class were equally or more attractive than the boy, although if we talk about physical attractiveness. Shaking his head to erase those thoughts, Yaoyorozu drank his mojito again in one gulp. Bad decision. Cough D Diablos, cursed Yaoyorozu, drinking so quickly had choked him. Yaoyorozu. The green-haired man called him worriedly, getting up from the armchair and letting the chestnut fall next to him. Any problem? Todoroki asked, fixing his attention on the black hair. I'm fine. It's not the big deal. Yaoyorozu quickly recomposed herself. I just choke a little, hee, she laughed nervously. Everyone who was in the armchairs was silent, and the music was the one that spoke for a few seconds. Deki, the brunette, spoke in his sleep. She had fallen asleep down in one of the armchairs. I think I'll take her to her room, said the red-haired man, trying to carry the brunette. However, it growled or moved with its eyes closed when it approached it. I think you'd better wait a little, Izumidoriya. Yaoyorozu corrected himself at the last second, his face flushed. Okay, nodded the green-haired man. Turning around, he realized that now there was only an empty space in the armchairs. Can I asked the black-haired woman. Say no, say that. See sure, replied the black-haired woman with a smile. Yaoyorozu pleaded. The night was still young for these young people. Unlike the sleepovers that Yaoyorozu had with her friends, last night's was by far the most fun she had ever had. If she had known that Midoriya had a taste for literature, she would have invited him every night to her room to have a night of pure talks regarding the different works they both read. It was magical, Yaoyorozu thought. It had been a long time since she had last remembered behaving like a hyperactive teenager excited about some boy band's latest album, except that instead of bands, she was excited about the books and the thousands of stories she could now discuss with her new friend. This one full of surprises. Izuku, thought the black-haired woman with a smile, even after he had left his room, couldn't help but write to his phone number to talk to him about what she read and discovered as she progressed in her reading. Without a doubt, what Yaoyorozu liked the most about the boy was his change of attitude when he felt in conformity with it. It was a complete change of personality. Both looked like a couple of nerds excited by the latest comic of some famous franchise. Anyway, it was another day, and Yaoyorozu was not waiting for the moment to tell Izuku the news. Dressing casually, the black-haired woman left her room and headed for the bedroom kitchen. As if it were fate, Izuku was having breakfast quietly. Midoriya. The black-haired woman called her animatedly from behind. Yaoyorozu, good morning. The green-haired man greeted him with a bow. Such formality is not necessary, he said, a little embarrassed by the attitude of his companion, the black-haired woman. You won't guess what I discovered yesterday when you left. I speak excitedly. Did you finish reading the whole book in one night? Said the red-haired man, surprised. Number one position in the class, you remember, said the black-haired woman, self-centered. It's incredible that you finished it in one night, Izuku praised. Honestly, I had to read it more than once to understand it. It wasn't a big deal, although I'm a little tired, she said with tears in her eyes from the big yawn. You got up very early. Few wake up at this hour, Izuku said. Must you have some other reason to get up early besides eating breakfast alone or not? Yaoyorozu asked, pouring himself a glass of juice. Well, always I get up at this time to exercise, scratched his head a little embarrassed. I completely forgot your quirk because of yesterday, said the black-haired woman. It's a quirk that doesn't go with what I know about you now, she laughed a little. You're right, I guess, hee, laughed the red-haired man. I'm sorry to ask for this, but could we talk after? I asked embarrassedly. Finishing drinking her juice, Yaoyorozu began to think a little about the little problem that Midoriya had put on her. I have it, thought the black-haired woman, snapping her fingers and finding a solution. Can I accompany you? Asked innocently and animatedly the black-haired woman. The green-haired man was speechless. It's okay? I accept, not knowing what else to say. Good. I'll go and change. I'll wait for you outside. I speak as if she were the one inviting him. After Yaoyorozu retreated from the kitchen, Izuku stood motionless and silent for a few seconds. What just happened? A long time later, the sound of a tapping woke up the black-haired woman. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, Yaoyorozu said, annoyed and irritated. This week was a nightmare for the black-haired woman. Her grades dropped noticeably. Izuku ignores me. Aizawa-sensei had called out to him for being late so many times. Izuku hates me. Her parents had called her, asking why her principal had informed them that their perfect daughter was straying from the path of excellence. She ended up yelling at her own parents only to end up crying for hours locked in her room. Finally, and the reason for all the things mentioned above was the argument he had with Izuku. Yaoyorozu. Uraraka shouted furiously, open it to me. Now. He knocked on the door hard. Sigh asterisk, what do you want? Asked the black-haired woman tiredly. Let's go outside. The brunette shouted in her face. Listen, I apologized to you before. The black-haired woman felt irritated. I said outside. Now. I take the chestnut from his shirt, bringing it close to his face to look him in the eyes with fury. Okay. Coming. Heavens. I accept, losing her patience a little. Without saying more, Uraraka took sounding steps outside the dormitories. What's going on? Asked a sleepy Ishido. She was also awakened by the Uraraka scandal. Nothing. Alone, go back to sleep. I try not to yell at Yaoyorozu, closing his room and heading for the exit of the building. Why was Uraraka screaming? The hairy woman asked again, her eyes narrowed. Yaoyorozu ignored her and the rest of her companions, who had also been awakened by the noise of Uraraka, who asked her the same thing as the hairy one. She simply passed them and headed for the exit. Once outside, noticed how beautiful the moon looked that night. It shone so brightly that it seemed that it was still daytime. You know why I asked you to come out, right? Uraraka spoke to him in front of him, his face full of determination and resentment. Listen, Izuku and I never wanted to hurt you, the black-haired woman tried to explain. Don't get him into this. The brunette shouted furiously, this is between you and me, she growled annoyed. We don't have to do this. This is what Izu a loud bang silenced him. I said you don't put him in this. Uraraka saw him furiously. Ouch, said the black-haired woman mentally. The force of the blow had made her fall. She knew that Uraraka was strong, but she did not think that a single blow from this one was going to draw blood from her. Uraraka, he tried to speak as Yaoyorozu got up. Stop. Ida shouted from the door, if either of us continues this dispute, I shall be obliged to make a report on it. I threatened to a pink pajama on? Turning to look at the entrance to the dormitories, Yaoyorozu was not surprised to see all of her companions gathered behind Ida as they muttered and had faces full of concern with the act she and Uraraka initiated. I don't care. Uraraka shouted defiantly, you can make a report, but you're not going to stop this, charged towards the black hair. Stop or I'll be forced to interfere. Ida replied firmly. Seeing how the chestnut approached her, Yaoyorozu quickly created her loyal shield, which always accompanied her when it came to one-on-one duels. Blinded by her fury, Uraraka didn't see Yaoyorozu's blow to her face with the hard metal of his shield coming, causing her to bounce back a little. Enough, Ida said, getting her engine ready. Let them, said Todoroki, putting a hand on his shoulder. How can you ask me for something? Again, he felt another hand on his other shoulder. This is personal for eyes. You should be the one who understands them best, Bakugo said, referring to the not-so-secret encounter with the hero killer. Just leave them, Ida. Todoroki spoke again. The president of Class 1A had given in. In the future, soon Ida will know that he did the right thing. Great party, isn't it? Hee. Izuku broke the ice, laughing a little nervously. The black-haired woman replied automatically without even turning to look at her friend. Everyone seems to be enjoying it, said the red-haired man, looking at her with a smile. Yaoyorozu nodded even without seeing him. An awkward silence formed between the two. Yaoyorozu used those seconds to observe his surroundings. Hyuka and Kaminari shared a tender kiss. Todoroki prevented Hagakure and Ishido from kissing his cheek by heating one side and freezing the other. It was a funny sight to see Hagakure stuck to the ice and Ishido trying to cool his cooked tongue. Did you finish reading the last book you borrowed? Izuku asked, trying to start a conversation. Oh yes. I can give it back to you if you want, the black-haired woman replied nervously. That would be great, yes, said the red-haired man. Again, an awkward silence. Izuku really thought that her friend would start talking to her about the book and she would give him her opinion, then he would give her his, then they would both start an endless talk and everything would be laughter because of the silly theories that they both invented, and none of that happened. Turning to see her next to him, the boy realized how nervous his friend looked at this moment. He had never seen her like this, thought the red-haired man. It was as if she had adopted his nervousness. Are you okay, Yaoyorozu? Asked the boy, worried in his tone of voice. I'm fine. It's just this drink. It seems that it's affecting me a little. He-heats, laughed the black-haired woman, turning to look at him with a fake smile. It's okay, said the red-haired man, not very convinced. What did you think of the book? I ask, trying to start a conversation. Very good. I liked it a lot. The black-haired woman faked a smile again. It was already the third time that a silence had formed a new record. I'm going to go get something to drink, said the green-haired man with a tired and irritated tone. See you, I guess. He got up from the chair. Suddenly Yaoyorozu's world started to go by in slow motion. Good job. You despised him to such an extent that you frightened him. His conscience spoke to him. What am I supposed to do? Tell her not to leave and to stay alone so that she continues to behave in a curt manner. Go with him? Explain to her that the reason for her attitude was the incredible attraction she felt for him. It didn't matter. Izuku was her friend, maybe her best friend, and she wasn't going to let the friendship they both had be ruined by a simple wish. Willing to apologize and make things right, Yaoyorozu decided to stop her friend. You can do it. It will be a piece of cake. Easy. Midoriya, Todoroki called him first. You can help yourself from here. I'm leaving. He pointed to the jug of mojito. And thank you very much. The boy bowed. Good evening, said the boy, heading to his room. A little surprised and grateful for Todoroki's intervention, Yaoyorozu was silent for a few seconds, watching as her friend poured the drink in front of her. Now yes. Without interruption. Yon, we're leaving too. Ashido said, stretching out, rising from the chair next to Hagakure. It was fun, said the invisible girl cheerfully. Goodbye everyone. He said goodbye. See you tomorrow, Yaoyorozu. Lovebirds, she said, seeing Kyoka and Kaminari the hairy. Good evening, Hagakure, Ashido. Izuku politely said goodbye with a smile. I almost forgot. Ashido suddenly recalled. Quickly approaching the red-haired man, the hairy girl stood on tiptoe and grabbed his face so she could steal a kiss on the cheek from poor Izuku, who lit up like a lamp instantly. Ashido? I call him completely, surprised the green-haired man. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. You look very handsome tonight, said the hairy one mischievously. See you, she said goodbye, leaving the poor boy hypnotized. And see you, he said, following the hairy Izuku with his gaze. The party was already ending for some, but for a certain black-haired woman with a frown. The party was just beginning. Time later. From the first time they did it, Yaoyorozu had a little question that always bothered and surprised him. Izuku. I call her the black hair. Wait a minute, replied the red-haired man from his bathroom. It wasn't weird, but it didn't seem to make much sense to him either. However, all your doubts would be cleared once your friend answered a question. Okay, what's wrong? Asked the green-haired man coming out of the bathroom with nothing but a towel covering him from the waist down. I completely forget the question of the black-haired woman. Her eyes ran every inch of the boy's body. While her friend was left with her mouth open, analyzing every inch of the boy's body, it seemed that she was about to drool. Izuku decided to look for her shirt and get ready to retire. It wasn't until he finished dressing that the black-haired woman came to. I'm sorry, it's hard to focus with so many distractions, Yaoyorozu said with a smile. Were you going to ask me something? The green-haired man reminded her, sitting on the opposite side of his friend's bed. Oh, I almost forgot, the black-haired woman snapped her fingers. You weren't a virgin the first time we did it, were you? I ask without any shame. The boy began to break out in a cold sweat at his friend's question. Stopping halfway through her stockings, Izuku turned to look at her friend with a nervous smile, who looked very calm. Be well, the boy spoke, trying to sound calm. I knew, said the black-haired woman instantly, kneeling on her mattress to approach her friend. Really? Asked the red-haired man, surprised but still nervous. Be well, not exactly, replied the black-haired woman, not sure of herself. Are you upset? Asked the red-haired man, sweating a lot now. To be honest, a little yes, said the black-haired woman, taking the green-haired man by the shoulders, forcing him to lie on her lap. How did you discover it? Asked, looking into her eyes, the green-haired man. A blush accompanied by a mischievous smile formed on the face of the black-haired woman. Let's just say that your actions gave you away, began to stroke her hair. Now it was Izuku's turn to blush. "Does this change anything between us?" asked the red-haired man a little more calmly. "I want to know who it was," said the black-haired woman with seriousness on her face. "Is it necessary?" Izuku asked, intimidated. "Absolutely," Yaoyorozu said firmly. Is it a long story?" "I try to get out of the situation." "There are no classes tomorrow," the black-haired woman countered by sounding melodious. Wait a minute," she said, rising from her friend's lap. Once seated, Izuku inhaled and exhaled as he had never done in his life. Yaoyorozu only observed his friend's attitude with a smile. Despite everything they had been through together, it seems that Izuku would never stop being who he is. "With details or?" asked the red-haired man embarrassedly, returning to his place on his friend's legs. "Surprise me," he replied, resuming his caresses to the boy's hair. "Yaoyorozu. Do you know H. Hatsume? D from the support department?" The boy began. "Maybe I didn't think things through," the black-haired woman mentally scolded. When she agreed to accompany Midoriya to her morning training, she thought that the boy would take her to the high school gym, which was where she normally kept fit. Instead, the boy had already surprised her. As soon as he left the dormitories, the green-haired man was already getting ready for his training by putting weights on each of his limbs. Seeing how he could move naturally, the naive black-haired woman asked her friend for some weights, who gave in after so many pleas. Yaoyorozu developed a trauma with the weights after that experience. It was like you were struggling to drag the heaviest object in the world. "I'm so sorry." She hurriedly took the weight from her friend. "I'm really sorry," she said, helping her to get up. "I'm fine," the black-haired woman lied. "I think I saw my life pass through my eyes," she thought. "Was it me who asked you to wear them or not?" He smiled at her. Even so, the red-haired man continued to feel bad. Sighing with a smile, Yaoyorozu watched as his friend carried the now deadly weights as if it were holding a book. "Yes, you are strong," Midoriya thought the black-haired woman, feeling a little inferior to the boy. Taking advantage of the fact that her friend took his time stretching and warming up, she couldn't help but analyze her friend from head to toe. When did he become so tall? The black-haired woman wondered, surprised. As she remembered, the boy had always been short in stature. Now he took a whole head to the black-haired woman. That wasn't the only noticeable change that Yaoyorozu noticed. He must train hard. He couldn't help but think about the black-haired one. Normally, Izuku always wore baggy clothes because he said it was more comfortable. However, now that the green-haired man was wearing nothing more than a sweatshirt, his physique could be seen in all its glory and was attractive, thought the black-haired woman. "Do you still want to accompany me?" asked the red-haired man, taking the black-haired woman out of his thoughts. Yes, if there's no problem." What was that? Yaoyorozu wondered strangely. It was strange for her to have that kind of thought. "Be well then." I take a deep breath, the red-haired one. Just let me know if you have any problems, is be okay?" he said in a worried tone. In his life, Yaoyorozu had met someone more altruistic than this boy. "Just weights, okay?" smiled, preparing for anything, the black-haired woman. "Well, nerve took over the boy." Turning around and bending down enough, the boy stretched his arms so that he seemed to be inviting her to ride him like a horse, something funny according to Yaoyorozu's perspective. Could you get on my back, please?" I asked with a red face. "Is this part of your training?" asked the black-haired woman, a little confused. Could you say yes?" replied the red-haired man, not sure of himself. "I say if I make some effort when I do this," he explained. "It's okay then," Yaoyorozu downplayed. "Just remember that you're not the only one who has to exercise, okay?" He steeled the boy to climb on him. When her hands made contact with her friend's body, she swore for a few seconds that a shock ran through her body. Yaoyorozu ignored this and continued to settle down. "One more thing." Izuku spoke at the same time as he stood up. Hold tight and don't shout in my hatred, please," he asked. "What do you mean?" Before Yaoyorozu could finish her sentence, Izuku activated her quirk, and everything started moving at high speed. "Start the training." Time later. "You're in love," said the blonde in a Machiavellian voice on top of her. W. Yaoyorozu replied surprised and confused, ceasing her attempts to free herself. I noticed it the moment I saw your eyes. The blonde forcibly raised her face, forcing the black-haired woman to look at her. Yaoyorozu really didn't know what to feel in those moments. Fear, surprise, anguish, helplessness, or… I don't know what you're talking about, said the black-haired woman trying to hide her fear. What is this? Dramatized, covering her mouth with her hand. You don't accept your feelings? He said in a surprised tone. This girl thought the black-haired woman was as if she were reading her mind. There was a possibility that this was her quirk, something that didn't make sense according to the information she had about her. Himiko Toga, a former member of the League of Villains, whose quirk Yaoyorozu was informed was to take the form perfectly of any individual from whom he has blood. A very useful and dangerous quirk. Someone who did not know the individual from whom she decided to transform would be an easy victim for the serial killer. He's useless, whispered the black-haired woman. What are you saying now? The blonde asked without losing her smile. The place will be full of P-professionals in a few minutes. You won't be able to flee. Yaoyorozu tried to threaten her. If I were you, I would escape. He smiled at her. The black-haired woman's face was hard against the hard concrete of the floor, which was not so well cared for. Don't worry about that charm. He raised the now bleeding face of the black-haired woman again. If she survives so many years alone, it is for a reason. Her smile increased. Yaoyorozu gave a cry of pain when she felt how the blonde inserted a syringe roughly into her left arm. She could feel how her blood was extracted little by little. Luckily for her, Toga only took what was necessary. Ready for it? The blonde as if nothing had happened. Now, because you don't tell me a little about this boy, he slammed his face on the ground again. You're crazy, Yaoyorozu said breathlessly, obviously affected by the blood draw. Of love, the blonde replied playfully that if you tell me, I may not murder you or any of them. I turned to see the group of bodies behind her. This shouldn't have happened. Thought the black-haired woman, recapitulating the facts. This was by far the worst scenario she had imagined. It was supposed to be an easy and quick capture. She, along with a group of professional heroes, would go to investigate the frequent complaints of neighbors who swear to hear screams of agony in an abandoned building, all declaring that it was not some haunted house or anything like that. They were two professionals, and she, an outstanding student of UA, would be lying if she said that at the time of the patrol, she did not feel confident. That was his mistake. How could they even think that an ex-member of the League of Villains would be there? They couldn't notice his presence. They couldn't even hear when it came close enough to sedate them one by one. They were no match for Toga, not even a UA student. She couldn't react in time when she stuck her needle in her forearm, deactivating her quirk and leaving her at the mercy of the sadistic blonde. Yes, if I tell you about him, Yaoyorozu surrendered. Will you let us go? His eyes met hers. Pinky promise, replied the blonde. I had no choice. Maybe if I gained time someone could come, anyone, no matter who, if it was distracted for a few seconds would be enough. Izuku mentally named him the black-haired one. Ready to talk, Yaoyorozu began to invent what she would say to the blonde. In no way was she going to give someone like her information about. Bus. Her attention was fixed on one of the black-haired woman's pockets. What is this? He wondered, looking at his vibrant pocket. No. Huh? It seems that someone is worried about you. He took the device out of his pocket. I wonder who it is. He held the cell phone. Please, that is not. Screamed the blonde loudly, and he's the one you admire? His voice changed to a higher one. Don't answer. Shouted the black-haired woman loudly, losing all fear of the blonde. Silence please. Once again she hit her on the ground. I'm going to ask reinforcements. The voice of this changed at the last second. Using all her strength to lift her face against Toga's pressure, Yaoyorozu managed to see out of the corner of her eyes her oppressor. Her eyes were instantly filled with horror. Izuku, I need your help. Come to this address quickly? Toga said, now looking like the black-haired woman. Izuku, the black-haired woman tried to shout, only to be hit again, this time with much more force than the previous times. Would you mind? I'm on the cell phone right now, he said to cover the cell phone so that Izuku doesn't hear. Sniff P please, said the black-haired woman with her weak voice. I beg you, Tears began to fall from her eyes. Don't worry, sweetness, the blonde approached the hatred of the black-haired woman. I'll take care of him. She whispered to her. Far from that place, jumping from roof to roof, Izuku got a chill that ran down his entire spine. You're sleeping with Midoriya, aren't you? Tsuyu asked unscrupulously. **Q? I ask, not believing what Yaoyorozu was hearing. It almost gets stuck with its glass of water. Then if they are doing it, said the young woman thoughtfully, lowering her gaze a little. But I didn't say anything. I try to act calmly, the black-haired woman. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Tsuyu turned to look at him. Although I don't think I'm the only one who already knows. Relaxing a little, Yaoyorozu gave a long, tired sigh. It was a matter of time, the black-haired woman thought. As careful as they both were about their escapades to see each other, they were both aware that one or two of their peers was going to find out what kind of relationship they shared. We should never have done it in my room, thought the black-haired woman. In that case, they were both to blame. The heat of the moment had made them act without thinking about the consequences. Luckily for him, apparently none of his classmates were nearby at the time. Tsuyu? Yaoyorozu called him. How did you notice? She asked, blushing and curious. I've always paid a little more attention to Midoriya than to the others, he explained. Surprised by her friend's response, Yaoyorozu couldn't help but raise a lot of questions regarding the way her friend responded to her. May I ask why? The black-haired woman felt genuinely curious. Tsuyu sighed and moved a little, feeling uncomfortable. Following the gaze of her partner, Yaoyorozu noticed that she was watching Izuku, who was chatting with a smile next to Ida and Uraraka in the bedroom room. Placing one hand on the kitchen shelf and the other to support her face, Tsuyu lowered her gaze. I used to like Midoriya, I reveal. Oh, Yaoyorozu said, surprised but calm, I understand. She suddenly felt uncomfortable. I guess I still can't quite get over it, Tsuyu went on. Why me? Guilt and sorrow took over the black-haired woman. I had no idea. He didn't know what else to say. I'm not angry with you, Yaoyorozu. Tsuyu turned to look at him with a smile. She only smiled back at him, feeling better. Even so, said the black-haired woman, because never do you know. I hope she understood what she meant. For Uraraka, he replied, a simple, I like you couldn't stand against Uraraka's, I love you. Tsuyu explained. I wonder what would have happened if Tsuyu was in my place and I was in his thoughts. The black-haired woman, her friend, could well have been the one who at this moment has the same type of relationship that Izuku and she had. I can ask you one last thing, Tsuyu turned to look at him. Of course. Although Tsuyu's gaze almost never changed, she could tell that she was serious. Do you love him? I asked, looking into her eyes. Tell him the truth. His conscience spoke to him. Lately Izuku had been acting differently, as if that were not enough. Now their encounters were more frequent, and she could notice when he made an effort to please her more. Not that bothers me, thought the black-haired woman blushing. Even so, the most common change that she noticed in her friend happened in their reading sleepless nights. Normally both always settled down and gave each other their space for reading, something important for them. Now it was different. Yaoyorozu noticed when he was more delicate and affectionate with her. On the last night of reading they had, when she called him to see a part that she liked in his work, he literally hugged her from behind. Let's just say that they both ended up doing more than just sharing their ideas. We agreed that there would be no feelings in between, replied the black-haired woman, not sure of her answer. I understand, but you haven't answered my question yet. Tsuyu stared at him. Why me? Feeling a little intimidated by her friend's look, the black-haired woman began to feel nervous and looked away. His gaze fell on the green-haired man who spoke animatedly next to his winged chestnut. They both looked happy together. Feeling someone's gaze, Izuku turned to look at the kitchen, finding that look that caused him so many feelings. Ignoring the face it had, the boy did what he would normally do when his friend was around and smiled at him. No, I don't love him, Yaoyorozu replied. Deep inside, where only feelings reign, something broke. Tsuyu stared at him for a few seconds. The answer sounded legitimate. However, from how it looked at the time of giving him the answer. I understand, he said in a disappointed tone. Does that mean you'll still be by his side, no matter what? He hinted. Yaoyorozu only answered yes, while she still had her gaze glued to the ground. He won't abandon you no matter which way you go, that's Midoriya, Tsuyu continued. I know, replied the black-haired woman weakly. Good. Tsuyu moved away a little. Good luck with Todoroki then. He left the kitchen, waving goodbye. And she was left alone, no one but her and her thoughts, although she convinced herself again and again that it was the right thing to do. Something had changed in her. Yaoyorozu called from the entrance of the kitchen the cause of their mixed feelings. Hello, is something wrong? She asked, still affected by her conversation with Tsuyu. I wanted to ask you if it would be okay for you to go to your room a little earlier today. The thing is, the red-haired man continued talking. Yaoyorozu had stopped listening to him a few seconds ago. His head and heart didn't let him concentrate on anything. He had to get out of there, he had to get away from it. I'm sorry I don't feel well today. Could we skip this weekend? The black-haired woman asked, feigning a smile. She didn't even realize that she had interrupted the boy. A little surprised by the interruption of this one, Izuku felt as if it was uncomfortable or upset. His illuminated face was gradually fading. I understand it will be for the next one then, he said, smiling at him as he always does. Thank you for understanding. See you soon. The black-haired woman left at a hurried pace. "Dubby get better," he managed to say before seeing how she locked herself in her room. There was no Friday reading next week, or the next one, or the next one. Time later. I did it, thought the red-haired man, looking at the paper in his hands, couldn't articulate a word. It was just what he needed. With this he could finally find some peace. With this simple piece of paper, finally his problems could be left in the past and start without any distraction, away from her. Midoriya? His director called him for about the third time. Sorry, Director Nedzu, I'm a little happy, said the red-haired man, not sure of himself. Well, a little bit is weird. If I were you, I'd be jumping for joy. The rodent climbed up to his desk. Hee hee ha, laughed after a long time, Izuku. That's the spirit. Midori, he stopped when he saw the state of his student. All right, son? I asked worriedly. Even though tears were falling non-stop from his eyes, Izuku couldn't help but feel happy and sad at the same time. I wish he had been here, said the green-haired man with melancholy, remembering all the moments he spent with his teacher. Sai, let him out, son, let him out. Nedzu came over to slap him on the head. The wound had opened again. All Might was the closest thing Izuku had to a father. He trained him, inspired him, and the bond that united them went from being one of simple teacher to student to one of father and son. He had taught him so much. I'm sure I'd be more than proud of you. His director tried to cheer him up. He imagined the smile and happiness that he would have had to know that his disciple would be the first ambassador hero of the US in different parts of the world. Now not only his country would have an education like his. With Izuku's help, the UA could now expand all over the world. Can I ask you for something, Director Nedzu? The boy asked, wiping away his tears. Whatever it is for the US representative, said the rodent with a smile. Taking his time to think about whether what he would be about to ask for would be the right thing to do or not, Izuku stood up from his seat and said, Don't make this public until I'm gone. Izuku has faced many things in his life, literally. He had fought monsters, mutants, rebels, villains, murderers, etc. The extraordinary thing about the boy was the courage with which he faced them. No matter how intimidating he looked or what difficult situation he was in, Midoriya always managed to beat his rivals. But if we talk about girls, well, seriously, Midoriya, it's like I'm kissing a pillow, said the hairy one with a smile. Why yo? Try to articulate a word, the red-haired one, failing olympically. Normally it is the man who takes the initiative, you know? He laughed, enjoying the situation. May, her cheeks red but her smile firm. Why? The boy wondered, not understanding what just happened. Only a few moments ago, they were both very normal. She had asked him to bare his torso so that she would make some measurements with respect to an experiment in which she works. Izuku, being the innocent boy that he is, he accepted without further ado. It was not the first time that she asked him. Things got even stranger when she stared at him in a serious tone for a few seconds, something that was rare in the hairy girl since she always wore a smile no matter what situation she was in. Officially something was happening to the hairy girl. When she still saw him seriously, she asked him if he considered her attractive. After a blush and a nervous breakdown, the green-haired man ended up admitting with difficulty that indeed, he considered her pretty bad answer. This is my first time too, you know. He brought his face close to the green-haired man, putting his finger on his lips. So let's make it memorable, smiled the hairy one playfully. Again, the green-haired man froze in the metaphorical sense, of course, because literally Izuku was burning inside. How did this happen? She wondered loudly in her mind. The poor thing had come with the intention of her friend repairing her suit as was usual for them. Waiting for this reason quite, said the hairy one between kisses, with an enthusiastic tone. What? The redhead shouted internally, trying to reason what his friend had said, although it was very difficult for the redhead to think, with everything the hairy one was making him feel. What do you mean? Izuku managed to say it with great difficulty. Stopping her attack, Mei stared into the eyes of the green-haired man for a few seconds. It was not after a few moments that she moved away from the boy a little, letting him breathe normally. It's your fault, the hairy woman revealed with a smile, her breathing agitated. I don't understand, said the green-haired man between panting. Sigh you're hot, that's all, the hairy girl said quickly, approaching the green-haired woman again to continue her attack. Wait. I try to stop the hairy one, the green-hairy. Unlike the previous times, Mei was surprised to feel how Izuku returned the kiss, not as carefully as she did, of course, and took her shoulders to be able to attract her a little more. Knowing where things were going, the hairy girl took control of her pockets and pointed them to the entrance of her workshop. Pressing the only button that the device had, she heard how the door lock was activated, leaving them both locked up. It wasn't until after 5 minutes of kissing and caressing, the last from Mei, that the young lovers found themselves looking into each other's eyes once again, both full of energy and desire. You have pretty eyes, said the hairy girl, smiling affectionately at him. Thanks, spoke the red-haired man, forgetting his shyness. You know what's coming, don't you? Hatsum asked, feeling nervous suddenly. I think so, replied the red-haired man, swallowing hard. That's enough, said the hairy girl, putting her lips back together with those of the green-haired woman. Going back to Izuku and Yaoyorozu. Then Mei explained to me that the reason for her actions was my constant visits and my constant provocations, explained the red-haired blusher. Let me guess, Yaoyorozu spoke. You always changed in front of her, didn't you? I asked in an obvious tone. The boy just nodded nervously. That wasn't the last time they did it, was it? I asked, feeling bothers. Yaoyorozu. Izuku shook his head from side to side, feeling embarrassed. Sigh well, that explains everything, said the black-haired woman. Removing his head from his legs, Yaoyorozu lay down looking at the green-haired man's opposite side, no longer knowing what to think about his friend. Are you angry? Asked the red-haired man, knowing that the answer was obvious. Yes and no, replied the black-haired woman, raising her head a little to answer him. I'm sorry if I made you feel bad, Izuku apologized sadly. Sighing tired but embarrassed, Yaoyorozu got up and turned to see the boy in front of her. Izuku, the black-haired woman called him. Ice. He replied, turning to look at him. You don't keep meeting with her, or do you? Yaoyorozu asked with a tone of concern. No. Not anymore. That was a long time ago, what's more? It's been a long time since I've even been to his workshop, the red-haired man hurriedly explained. Letting out a few giggles, the black-haired woman smiled at her friend's attitude. In no way could she think that someone as altruistic as Izuku would be a womanizer in secret. At most, he could be called someone with lust if you talk between men. I believe you, said the black-haired woman, taking the green-haired woman's face to give him an apology kiss for doubting him. Feeling how he kissed her back, Yaoyorozu let herself be carried away by the boy, who gently laid her down on his bed. Even if the black-haired woman hasn't said it, she felt a spark that was already familiar to her again when he made contact with her skin. One last question, said the hairy woman before continuing, which of the two is better? He smiled mischievously. Izuku smiled back. You're going to have to prove it. He was surprised by what the red-haired man answered. Something about Yaoyorozu made him gain confidence to say that kind of thing. And that's exactly what the black-haired woman did. She showed it. Time later. Izuku was not a spiteful person, much less aggressive and foul-mouthed. Anyone who knew him would say that he was polite and respectful. However, what characterized the boy the most was undoubtedly his altruism. The boy simply could not help but see other people suffer and not do anything about it. It was something that his nature did not allow him. To hell with his nature. Just like all other people, Izuku was a human. He also felt it was normal for a human being to feel sad, hopeless, and, in more extreme cases, angry. Since Aizawa-sensei is busy, Kirishima spoke energetically. "What do you think if we have a dueling tournament?" he asked jovially. Since it was almost the end of the year, lately the teachers of the academy were busier than ever, leaving free time on certain occasions to the students. This was one of those cases. "It's not a bad idea," Tsuyu said, speaking first among the group. "It's all right," Todoroki spoke. I wanted to do something more fun," Ashido spoke a little depressed. Little by little, the other members of the class accepted the red-haired man's proposal. Even Ida gave her consent as president of the class, explaining that the activity would serve to strengthen the bonds between classmates. Deku? Uraraka called him next to him. "Is everything okay?" she asked worriedly. "It's nothing," he replied with a false smile. "I'm a little thoughtful, that's all," he lied. While Kirishima explained the rules and drew the numbers to see who would face whom, Izuku kept looking at the blackhead who hurt him so much. Clenching her fists tightly, he noticed how she turned for a few seconds to meet his gaze, turning immediately when she noticed how he was watching her. The green-haired man asked himself, annoyed inside after sharing so much together. Is it that everything they went through was worth nothing to her? Well then, let's get started. Kirishima shouted excitedly, pulling the green-haired man out of his thoughts. The group headed to training camp, where they fought as a pair as villains and heroes in their first year. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or not, but of all the scenarios that existed, the place his companions chose was the same one they used in their first meeting, the one in the abandoned building. "Deku, we should go and sit down," Uraraka spoke to her sweetly. He noticed how the boy was tense but decided only to keep silent. Izuku usually gets excited when he watches his teammates or any hero in general perform on the battlefield. It was different this time. Watching his teammates' every move, the green-haired man found himself destructively criticizing himself as they could have done better, something totally different from how he used to analyze a hero. Deku, are we friends and no? Uraraka asked. Friends do their best to help each other. The green-haired man was about to respond to him in the same way as the first time. However, Kirishima beat him to it. Midoriya. The red-haired man called him. "It's your turn, brother." I inform him. "We'll talk about this later, okay?" said the green-haired man before leaving. He didn't even turn to tell him. Leaving a deeply troubled brunette in the stands, Izuku made his way leisurely to the battlefield, stretching and preparing for his duel. The universe was tempted to turn to see Yaoyorozu when he passed by his place. He decided he wouldn't bother her with another failed attempt to speak. "Don't hold back, Midoriya, because I won't do it," said Shiro determinedly, finishing stretching himself in front of him. "I don't have time for this," the red-haired man said mentally, clenching his fists tightly and taking a room to fight. Izuku did something he wasn't used to doing when confronted with someone. He put on his hood. "Start!" Kirishima shouted. Shiro's attack was quick but predictably. The black-haired man tried to attract the green-haired man in the same way he faced Todoroki at the sports festival of his first year. Unlike Todoroki, Izuku didn't even give the poor black-haired man a chance. Taking both ribbons tightly, the green-haired man was the one who ended up dragging the black-haired man with just a little force from his quirk. The way in which this shot of the ribbon allowed him to prepare for any counterattack the black-haired man tried to make, Shiro did not have time to react. Opening his arms as wide as he could, Izuku only had to wait for the right moment to be able to imprison the black-haired man with his arms, who could not prevent anything the green-haired man had planned. Once in his arms, Izuku didn't even need his quirk to make the black-haired man give up because of the force with which he squeezed him, leaving the poor thing almost breathless. "Midoriya wins," Kirishima said, surprised by the speed at which the match ended. Everyone present was surprised by the way he had defeated him. Something Ironic if you took into account that Tsuru's quirk was basically to hold someone captive or squeeze them. The whole class was even more surprised when the green-haired man dropped the black-haired man as if nothing had happened, leaving him lying on the floor desperately trying to catch his breath, something totally unusual for the altruistic green-haired man. Deku, I mentioned the chestnut in the stands worriedly. Like her, a certain black-haired woman couldn't help but have the green-haired man in her thoughts. Izuku, on the other hand, only felt anger and emptiness. Let's continue with the duels, said Kirishima, a little subdued, surprised like the others. Little by little, the tournament was forgotten, now becoming a round against Midoriya. At first, everyone took it as a simple challenge to see who could be the one to defeat the red-haired. They should not have underestimated it. The way Izuku defeated his teammates was it even seemed that the boy was doing it on purpose, just to discredit his opponent. Kyoka stunned by a sound wave caused by a slap of the boy's quirk, Ida outpaced and immobilized in a matter of seconds. I give up, Fumikage said without further ado, turning his back on the green-haired man. I'm not going to fight you in the state you're in, he left without saying more. Izuku used all his strength to not smash his teammate to the ground or send him flying with a single blow. No one wanted to fight with him anymore. Even the green-haired man could notice how Ashido trembled a little when he had to face him. It was enough to immobilize it on the ground for it to surrender. I can see that you are upset, Midoriya, said Todoroki, standing in front of the boy for his turn with him. I am not, said the green-haired man behind his mask. I hope your state of mind doesn't make a mistake, the boy prepared to attack. I hope you're ready for what's coming up. You can start, Kirishima said, no longer sure how the duel would end. Without wasting a second, Todoroki froze the entire ground, hoping that the attack would immobilize the green-haired man, which did not happen. Izuku had already anticipated the attack by jumping high off the ground. Trying not to give him time to think, Todoroki began to throw flames at him without caring that they roasted the green-haired man. Once again, Izuku only had to fall with momentum to the ground to avoid and, at the same time, take away the balance of his opponent with the earthquake that this caused. Tisk, Todoroki clicked annoyed and irritated, seeing that none of his attacks had any effect. Izuku only had to make one big jump to end up next to him. Before the green-haired man could land a punch on him, Todoroki covered himself with a huge pillar of fire, preventing Izuku from hitting him. This did not stop the red-haired man. Moving away a little, Izuku gave a blow strong enough to disperse the flames of his companion. As soon as they had been completely extinguished, Izuku was already running in his direction to end the duel. It's not going to be that easy, he said, covering himself with a layer of Todoroki ice, thick enough to be able to withstand one of his blows. Letting out a growl of annoyance, the red-haired man focused his energy on one of his fists and destroyed the ice sheet at one blow. Todoroki flew away from the green-haired man, crashing into a nearby wall. He spat out a little blood as he barely got up. Give up, said the red-haired man in front of him, ready to finish off the boy. Without answering him, Todoroki tried to distract him with a flame with one of his hands, but it was useless. Izuku only had to take his arm and direct the flame to the side of his face, avoiding any burn. Before Todoroki could freeze his hand, Izuku gave him a hard knee in the pit of his stomach, leaving him unconscious. Todoroki! Kirishima shouted, frightened by what had happened to him. Like Kirishima, the other members of the class peeked out from the stands with concern. Once the red-haired man arrived next to the green-haired and unconscious Todoroki, he couldn't help but feel angry at Midoriya's actions. What's your problem? I ask, facing the red-haired man. I just want to end this, I answer without even turning to look at him, Izuku. This was totally unnecessary, so a man should not act. I shout as I help Todoroki up. Midoriya, said the injured boy, freeing himself from Kirishima's grasp. Unfortunately, the boy could not take more than 2 steps before falling unconscious again. This time Kirishima prevented him from falling to the ground. I think that's enough duels for today, the red-haired man looked at him annoyed. I hope you're happy, Midoriya. He passed from him with his partner in his arms. Izuku didn't move, his fists hurt, and his head was a mess. The anger inside him seemed to want to disappear, but he could still feel the adrenaline and the strength it gave him. It was something new for him. Deku. Bakugo roared from the stands, "Fight with me, Deku. I challenge him to come down from the stairs with the help of his quirk." Izuku smiled when he knew what he needed to be able to lower his stress and fury a little. A long time ago, the topic of the last sleepover had left Yaoyorozu very thoughtful. "Can I really indulge in having a relationship?" asked the black-haired woman. Ishido had made a good point by highlighting that now that villains were no longer a greater danger, they could enjoy a little of their youth. Sigh this is worse than a physical test, said the black-haired woman, tired of thinking the same thing every day. If for some reason I decided to have a relationship, the black-haired woman began to think, who would it be? She wondered, already knowing the answer. It was not a secret the feelings she had for Todoroki. Her companions often enjoyed bothering her with them. However, Yaoyorozu never thought that Todoroki could see her as a possible partner. The boy only had eyes for his responsibilities and nothing else. Unlike her, Todoroki had had to live a hard life since he was born. She, on the other hand, had been someone privileged for as long as she could remember. If there was one thing they both had in common, it was the economic part, just that. "I think that's the only thing we have in common," said the black-haired woman a little sadly. She didn't know him well enough to be able to approach him and talk to him naturally, nor had she done anything notoriously friendly with him. In simple words, both were nothing more than acquaintances. That was the truth. The fact that Yaoyorozu admired him to the point of having feelings for him did not mean that he felt the same way. "That reminds me," said the black-haired woman. "Did Todoroki have a real friend?" It was true that he hung out with others in other activities and that he was usually understandable and courteous to everyone. However, she had never seen him hang out with someone frequently enough to consider him a friend. "That's it," recalled the black-haired woman, getting up from her bed suddenly. If there was someone Todoroki normally hung out with or often accompanied, Midoriya. Did the black-haired woman remember? How had she not thought about it before? He wondered if it was the green-haired man who managed to make the cold and unshakable Todoroki open up a little with the others, not to mention that it was thanks to him that he accepted his father's quirk. "But," said the black-haired woman, lying down again. "There's a problem," he said mentally. As with Todoroki, Yaoyorozu had almost never exchanged words with the red-haired man. It wasn't that he disliked him, it just never had the opportunity to get to know the red-haired man deeply. He had his group, so to speak. "If I want to get close to Todoroki, I'll have to talk to Midoriya first," said the black-haired woman, concluding that this was the only way to get closer to Todoroki. "I can't believe I'm listening to Ishido." I end up thinking, disappointed in herself. The next day. Luckily for Yaoyorozu, Midoriya was one of the first to arrive at class with her, though to be honest, it was always both of them who arrived early to the classroom, much to Ida's disgrace. "Midoriya?" The black-haired woman called to him from her seat. The red-haired man was a little surprised. "Is something wrong, Yaoyorozu?" I asked respectfully. Do you talk to Todoroki?" The black-haired woman asked, a little embarrassed. Well," the red-haired man was thoughtful. "Yes, I guess?" It sounded more like a question. Lighting up and feeling more confident, Yaoyorozu got up from his seat and sat down behind the green-haired man, who was a little startled. "Could you tell me about him?" I asked, giving the green-haired man his full attention. The red-haired man asked, confused. "You said you knew him, didn't you? Could you tell me a little bit about him?" She asked again, feeling a little nervous. "But why me? Wouldn't it be better to talk to him?" The red-haired man asked, a little surprised and nervous. Cursing the green-haired man's curiosity, the black-haired woman began to think about the possibilities. She had to answer the boy. Should she tell him? He wondered internally, if she decided to confess to him about her plan to approach Todoroki, Midoriya may have a better idea of what information to give her. "Can you keep a secret?" said the black-haired woman in a low voice, although only the two of them were in the living room. "I'm okay." The red-haired man sounded insecure again. Once she told her, she was surprised to see how it was Midoriya who felt embarrassed and blushing instead of her. She couldn't help but laugh a little at his attitude. Things unfolded a little faster than Yaoyorozu thought they would be. Apparently, if Midoriya knew enough about Todoroki, the black-haired woman was tempted to take out a pen and paper to write down everything her partner told her. Again, Yaoyorozu laughed when she saw how Midoriya took out her characteristic notebook. With the information of all the heroes he knew, including her, she felt a little more comfortable seeing how her partner laughed like her because of how he let himself go. You really like it? You write things down, don't you? I ask, forgetting the subject of Todoroki's black hair. It's a bad habit, he laughed nervously, but with a smile, the green-haired man. I also write down a lot of things when I read, and I'm not saying it's a bad habit, the black-haired woman revealed, taking out an elegant and luxurious notebook. Really? Said the red-haired man, surprised. And I also take aim when I read. He scratched the back of his neck, a little embarrassed. Do you read? Asked the genuinely curious, hairy woman. What do you read? I looked directly at him. Well, a little bit of everything, I guess, replied the red-haired one. What's it that you read, Yaoyorozu? I asked curiously. The black-haired woman's face lit up like never before, and a smile formed instantly, accompanied by a twinkle in her eyes. Where do I start? Said the black-haired woman animatedly. It was not until his other classmates arrived that Yaoyorozu stopped talking. The whole class spent it wondering if he had forgotten to say some work to the red-haired man, who had surprised him by revealing that of all the lists that he recited, he had read several of the ones he mentioned. Forgetting completely about Todoroki, Yaoyorozu ended up accompanying the boy at recess, lunchtime, and even on the way out to the dormitories, with the sole purpose of chatting with him about the different stories they had both read, sometimes debating about something, other times laughing and remembering funny parts of the books they read. His roommates were surprised to see how they both stayed late in the living room, chatting next to a stack of books. It was not only in the reading that they both ended up identifying. Apparently they both liked the same pop band. Izuku had to admit it in a low voice. Yaoyorozu could not help but let out a cry of excitement when he heard his friend's revelation. Finally, Yaoyorozu decided to return the intimate secret to the red-haired man, revealing that she wrote novels in secret. Izuku forced her to bring some examples after she revealed such a secret. Even though all the lights were off in the bedrooms, a small lamp lit was enough for these two to continue laughing and chatting as if they had known each other for a lifetime. Yaoyorozu had found a new friend. Sometime later, I recommend playing Locos by Leon Laregi, degree. Hey Satu. I call him from the Kaminari armchair. Could you put a romantic one? I ask with a smile. I don't know, friend. It's not my style, he replied, a little dissatisfied with what the blonde asked of him. Please? Sweet Kyoka asked, trying to convince the boy. It's okay, the chestnut tree yielded, placing a slow and romantic song for the couple. Yaoyorozu wanted to curse the couple in front of her, although a part of her said otherwise. Here she was, next to the boy who had her crazy these last days. So spoke the red-haired man. Drawing courage from who knows where, the black-haired girl turned to see the boy while he drank from his mojito. Ashido was right, he said mentally. Izuku had really shown off tonight. The boy was wearing a white t-shirt, a little tight for the black-haired woman's discomfort, and a plaid shirt on top, jeans that combined perfectly with what was already mentioned. You look good, said the black-haired woman a little nervously. Thank you, smiled the red-haired man. Uraraka helped me choose clothes, he explained. I see, the black-haired woman spoke, thanking and cursing Uraraka for dressing him so well. Yaoyorozu called the green-haired man, leaving his glass to concentrate on the black-haired woman. That's everything I find? Say you've been different these last few days. I look him in the eyes. Well, I try to explain what the black-haired woman felt. Turning to look at the boy, she noticed how close their faces were. Or prove it. Prove it? Thought the black-haired woman. She felt hypnotized by the eyes of the green-haired man, as if she were bewitched. The black-haired woman began to bring her face closer to the green-haired one, no longer caring if her actions could destroy the friendship she had with her friend. Hey! Hick! Shouted a drunken Bakugu. What do you think you are doing? Hick! Pointed out the blonde. Feeling how her world was falling apart, Yaoyorozu slowly turned around with a horrified face to see who the blonde was pointing at. I ruined it, thought the black-haired woman, exaggerating things. She began to imagine the worst scenarios that would happen to her in the future. Jealous Bakugu? Kaminari replied with a self-centered smile. Go hick to do your stupid things in a hotel. Damn indecent hick, complained the blonde annoyed. Don't talk like that to my friends asterisk hick asterisk. Fumicage shouted annoyed, using his shadow to take the blonde and take him outside the bedrooms. Do you want to fight hick popcorn? Used his explosions to free himself from the blonde. Fight, shouted the others, even Uraraka, who woke up suddenly and began to cheer them both up, which seemed to struggle more against their own equilibrium. It was close. The black-haired woman thought relieved, completely forgetting the situation she was in. You look good too, Yaoyorozu, spoke the green-haired winged of his. Remembering what she was about to do, the black-haired woman felt her nerves take over again. Fixing her gaze on the green-haired man, the black-haired woman could notice how her friend's face had turned an intense red. Could it be that? I'm sorry, Izuku, the black-haired woman apologized sadly, the reason why I've been acting weird. She was ready to speak. She felt how the green-haired man took her hand, something they had already done before, but this time it felt comforting. It felt warm. It's you, the black-haired woman finished saying, tightening her grip on the green-haired man's hand. Unlike the first attack of the movie, this time she could notice how Izuku also tilted his face to kiss the black-haired woman. It was just a rose at first, something innocent and new for Yaoyorozu. It felt good, he thought. The second time she felt her friend's hands on her waist, bringing her closer while intensifying the kiss, something that surprised the black hair. Letting herself go, Yaoyorozu put her arms around the green-haired man's neck, bringing him as close as possible to her. Never in her life would the black-haired woman have imagined that someone with a face as innocent as Izuku was completely dominating the kiss they shared. The kisses began to become long and passionate. The black-haired woman did not remember the moment when the green-haired man ended up on top of her, but she cared little. If it weren't for the fact that they both needed oxygen, they wouldn't have been separated even if a villain had appeared. Do you want to go somewhere else? Asked the green-haired man between gasps. He never stopped looking into the eyes of the black hair. Yes, replied the girl in the same way. The pair went in the direction of the black-haired woman's room, their hands never leaving the other, as if they were a couple. This it will only be once, right? Asked the black-haired woman nervously in front of the door of her room. I suppose, replied the red-haired man, turning his friend delicately. Their eyes met. Desire completely took over them. The green-haired man literally put Yaoyorozu against the wall, or in this case, the door. The girl was surprised to feel how her friend's lips were directed to her neck and not to her lips. That will leave a mark, thought the Palyangra, feeling with great pleasure how he sucked her skin hard. Her legs began to fail as Izuku continued his attack. As if he could read her mind, the boy lifted her up enough so that now they were both on the same level and, Huh, said a voice near them. Yaoyorozu? Midoriya? Mineta told them, her eyes narrowed. The pair froze, the sound of their gasps all they could hear in the hallway. Heavens. I do need to go to sleep. I'm already hallucinating. Mineta spoke, opening her room and getting into it without saying more. The heat of the moment made them forget that they were not yet inside the black-haired woman's room. He was close, said the pair in unison. Yaoyorozu began to look for his key from his pockets. It hit his forehead hard when he remembered that he had left them inside. Putting it aside, Izuku used his quirk to literally destroy the lock of his door and open it from the inside. As if he were going to solve something, the green-haired man put the destroyed lock back on once inside. Izuku thanked the heavens that the black-haired woman's quirk was to create things, because if it hadn't been for her, they could have both ended up being young parents. Only for tonight, no? I asked while the green-haired man undressed. I'm starting to have my doubts, said the black-haired woman with a mischievous smile, climbing on her bed while inviting her friend to accompany her. That was definitely not the last time. When Izuku arrived at the address her friend had given her, he couldn't help but think that something was really wrong. He could feel it. It was that sixth sense that made him be alert at all times, because if he was careless even for a few seconds, the consequences could be fatal. Hello? Uraraka? The green guy called with his cell phone. Deku? Is Yaoyorozu okay? I ask already knowing the situation of the chestnut. I haven't entered the place yet, he said, looking skeptically at the building. I have a bad feeling about this. I speak in an impotent tone. Maybe you should wait for us all to arrive, she said, worried about the green-haired brunette. You don't have to go in by yourself. I try to persuade him. She's right, thought the red-haired man. Yairzu was someone completely capable of handling this kind of case. Trusted her, however. I'm sorry, he said before hanging up his green hair, turning off his cell phone, and preparing to enter. He had to make sure she was okay. The black-haired woman had become someone very important to him. They had both shared so much in such a short time. It was more than just a relationship of friends with rights. Although Izuku still had a little doubt about her feelings for her friend, the truth is that she had already occupied a place in her heart for some time now. Please, Izuku said aloud, moving from side to side, walking around the building, making sure there was no trap. The place was clear. There was nothing strange or dangerous nearby, something that the green-haired man missed a lot, which made him increase his guard even more. Deactivating his quirk, the boy took a deep breath before entering the building through one of the many entrances it had, preparing for whatever was coming. It's dark, the green-haired man said mentally, cursing his luck in not bringing with him some enlightenment. Having little vision would make things difficult for the boy later on. As he entered the building, the more the green-haired man began to lower his guard, no sound was heard other than his breathing. Desperation began to affect the red-haired man. What if she was kidnapped? He began to think worriedly and nervously because of how the idea was going to become a possibility. Without wasting any more time, the boy activated his quirk to move quickly. It was much more difficult to see things around him when he was moving at high speed, even so he did not stop. His heart was crushed when he managed to see in the distance a red and black dot lying on the ground. He increased his speed and stopped skidding just to end up in front of the body of what he suspected was his friend. Yairzu? He bent down to see how he was. He lifted her a little in his arms to see if she was injured. Izuku sighed in relief when he saw that she was unharmed. As he waved her to wake her up, the green-haired man couldn't help but feel that his friend was feeling different. It smelled different even through her suit. He could notice how different she felt in his arms. Adding the strange fact that she was unharmed, Izuku began to carefully analyze the black-haired woman in his arms. Izuku. Her friend called him almost in a whisper. Thank heaven you came, smiled the black-haired woman, taking him by the neck to give him a hug. What happened? I asked, not understanding much what was going on. The green-haired one? Where is the villain? He continued to. I'm escaping, said the black-haired woman, still hugging him tightly. I was very scared. Sniff. Izuku began to cry. Feeling how she slowly removed one of her hands from her neck, Izuku activated his quirk instantly and knocked the girl to the ground, holding each of her limbs tightly, preventing her from any kind of movement. I screamed, surprised and ecstatic. The black-haired one. You! Shouted the green-haired man, recognizing who he was dealing with. Where is Yairzu? I asked him furiously. What nonsense are you talking, Izuku? I look into her eyes. Am I here or not? She asked calmly. Where is it? Shouted the green-haired man, losing his patience. A shiver ran down the young man's spine. I can replace her, Izuku. She doesn't deserve you. Someone as pathetic as her can't be by your side. The black-haired woman brought her face closer. Izuku couldn't help but feel scared. This wasn't the first time he had confronted Toga. Apparently every time the League of Villains made an attack on them, the blonde always ended up concentrating on him. However, of all their encounters, this was undoubtedly the one that would mark the boy the most. The deranged face that she put on, accompanied by the desperate attempts that she made to get out of his grip. It was terrifying, not to say traumatizing. Give me just one chance. I'll prove it to you. The blonde brought her face even closer. Izuku? I call him now in his true voice. Fear paralyzed him. Seeing how it gradually began to take its true shape increased how bizarre and chilling everything looked. Toga took advantage of that moment to try to bite the face of the green-haired man, as if it were a shark trying to catch a bait in the air. The boy managed to dodge the bite, however. Doing this made him lean a little, loosening his grip on the blonde. I got you, said the blonde with her normal appearance. Managing to get one of her hands out, Toga took one of the dozens of knives that he has. Without even hesitation, The blonde took advantage of the time that the green-haired man used to reactivate his quirk. The girl tried to stick her knife into the boy's neck, missing by only a few centimeters. "See clothes," said the green-haired man, panting from a distant column. "It's my turn to be upstairs, Izuku," said the blonde, getting up from the floor and taking out a huge knife hidden under her sleeves. "Focus," the red-haired man said to himself, reactivating his quirk to face the blonde. "Here I go," Toga said, starting to run in the direction of the green-haired man. Again, fear took hold of Izuku. The feeling was such that the boy could not move his legs. "I couldn't even breathe well." He had to move, or else Toga would finish him off with a fine but lethal thrust. You have to remember why the red-haired man had come, managing to find determination and courage. "Save her?" Izuku roared, surprising the blonde in front of him. Before Toga took another step, the green-haired man was already in front of her. With a clean and quick blow to the stomach, the green-haired man left the blonde breathless. "Izu **ku," he said while trying not to fall the blonde. Her legs began to tremble, and she fell fainting, but not before showing her terrifying smile to the green-haired man, even after such a blow. Gasping for breath, Izuku dropped down to calm down for a while. "It was harder than I thought," he thought. The boy carried the girl on one of his shoulders and continued with his search, now at a faster pace, knowing that there would be no more threats nearby. And then he found it behind a piece of wood next to two other bodies. "I was bleeding." The boy threw the blonde away, not wanting her to be near her. With the grinding of his teeth and his trembling hands, Izuku hugged the abused Yaoyorozu in his arms. And then I cry. The sirens of the ambulances and the police were in charge of covering the roars that the red-haired man let out. The next morning, the small rays of sunlight that passed from her window woke up the hospitalized black-haired woman. She grunted a little when she felt a stabbing pain in her bandaged head. Rising heavily, Yaoyorozu began to slowly recall the events of the previous night, the patrol's capture of Izuku. Opening her eyes wide, the black-haired woman set out to look for the green-haired man, worried that he had fallen victim to Toga's trap. To her bad luck, a sick woman heard the noises she made while trying to get up. Taking advantage of her failed attempt to look for the green-haired man, Yaoyorozu asked the nurse if something had happened to her friend. "The boy is fine, he was here a while ago. He said he would come back later to visit her," the patient explained with a comforting smile. Letting out a sigh of relief, Yaoyorozu decided to listen to the nurse by lying on her bed to rest. Sometime later, things got a little more chaotic in the black-haired woman's room. Her parents arrived and gave her a huge hug, accompanied by hundreds of incoherent questions. Already becoming accustomed, her classmates were the next to visit her, except for Izuku, who repeated the action of their parents, but with a little less delicacy. Then came Izuku. "Hello." The black-haired woman greeted her nervously. Not even she understood the reason for her nervousness. The green-haired man did not answer him. He simply circled the black-haired woman with his arms and began to apologize for no reason. Yaoyorozu remained static for a few seconds, not understanding much what was happening with his friend. Even so, she returned the hug with the same impetus as this one. "It's okay," said the black-haired woman in a delicate voice. "I'm fine," she smiled in the embrace. "Don't lie to me," said the red-haired man, taking her by the shoulders to look into her eyes. Guided in his tone of voice. The black-haired woman lowered her gaze, trying to hide the fear and sadness that she had inside. Her encounter with the blonde had been the closest thing to a nightmare in real life. Yaoyorozu was scared. "I was afraid," Izuku said, the black-haired woman with her broken voice, covering her face in an attempt to stop the tears that were beginning to fall. Without thinking twice, Izuku hugged her again, unlike the first time. He had the confidence to stroke his friend's hair. He didn't care that someone came in and saw them in such a way, much less the fact that his friend was soaking his polo shirt. He just wanted to comfort her, to let her know that he was there for her. Why Izuku loved her. Time later, Yaoyorozu felt that his heart was going to explode from how fast it was beating, and it was not an exaggeration, because being thousands of meters above the ground without any protection other than the grip that it had on his friend's neck was something that would scare even the coldest of men. "Imi Midoriya?" The black-haired woman called her scared. "Put me down." "Put me down?" She screamed desperately, tightening her grip on the green-haired man's neck. Okay, he said, feeling how it suffocated him. I didn't think I had that much strength, thought the red-haired man surprised. Looking for a safe place to land, the green-haired man concentrated a little more strength on his feet to be able to land well despite the pain caused by his friend's screams. Are you okay? Asked the green-haired man nervously, landing on top of one of the buildings near the high school. Yaoyorozu? He called to him, seeing that she still did not come down from his back. One moment, said the black-haired woman, panting, trying to recover from the second trauma she had developed in less than a morning. I can take you back if you want, he offered, feeling bad. I'm fine, let's end this, said the black-haired woman, approaching the green-haired man to be able to climb on his back. Closing his eyes tightly, Yaoyorozu managed to overcome the huge jumps that his friend made from roof to roof without having to scream or choke the green-haired man. And we're here, the green-haired man informed her, bending down for his friend to come down. The smell of salt and the sound of the sea caused the black-haired woman to open her eyes suddenly, carefully getting down from her friend's back. She could not help but smile at such a portrait in front of her. The sun was beginning to rise in the distance, illuminating the crystal-clear sea next to the colorful sand of the beach. It was beautiful. The beach? Yaoyorozu asked, confused and surprised, coming to her senses. Do you train here? I turned to look at the black-haired woman. Yes, the green-haired man replied, looking at the horizon in the same way. Why this place? The black-haired woman asked curiously. A sad and nostalgic face formed on the face of the green hair. This was where he trained me, she said, lowering her gaze. She asked, a little surprised by her friend's change in attitude. All Might. I turned to see the green hair, determination and pain in his eyes. It was the first time Yaoyorozu had seen the boy's face carefully in all these years. It has changed, thought the black-haired woman, admiring the air of maturity that he transmitted, increasing the new face that he had. She couldn't help but think that Izuku looked great. I had no idea that he was the one who trained you, she said, a little surprised and embarrassed. Remembering the whole one-for-all thing, Izuku began to sweat nervously. Say, from time to time we used to meet in this place, and, well, I try to invent an excuse for the red-haired one. It's still Midoriya after all, the black-haired woman thought with a smile, watching as he struggled to find the right terms. I understand, you don't have to explain Midoriya to me. I try to calm the boy down. How about we start doing some exercise? The black-haired woman began to warm up. Let's get started, replied nervously, throwing himself like a soldier on the floor to start doing push-ups. Laughing a little at his friend's attitude, Yaoyorozu began to imitate the red-haired man. I would soon regret it. 30 minutes later. Exhausted, there was no other way to express how tired and sore Yaoyorozu felt, unlike a hyperactive and energetic Harry winged by her. And it's not necessary to imitate me, Yaoyorozu, said the red-haired man, smiling nervously. T takes his time to get the R rhythm, he reported. It hurts everything, replied the black-haired woman in a low voice, lying on her back on the soft sand. He laughed, the red-haired man a little embarrassed. He was now going for 100 push-ups with only one arm. How can you do this daily? Yaoyorozu tried to get up with difficulty. This is horrible, managed to hold herself trembling. It's a matter of discipline, he replied while changing arms. Can we go back? I feel like I could throw up. The black-haired girl began to change color. Give me a few minutes, the green-haired man asked, getting up. Okay. He took his stomach in danger, trying to stop his intense suffering. The green-haired man sighed and inhaled deeply. After a few seconds, the calm and relaxed countenance changed to a serious and determined one, surprising the black-haired woman near him again. Wow, said the black-haired woman with her mouth open, seeing how her friend moved at high speed and performed hard exercises in a matter of seconds. 15 or 20 minutes of pure exercise passed without rest for the green-haired man. Yaoyorozu just watched all that time, not being able to believe his eyes. Okay, we can now go, said the green-haired man tiredly, leaning next to the black-haired woman and then showing her his back. You should rest a little, recommended the black-haired woman, saying it more because she didn't want to get wet with the boy's sweat. Yeah, it's okay, I accept without arguing with the red-haired man, taking off his shirt to let his body breathe. Yaoyorozu, of course, had no choice but to enjoy the show and relax. You've seen worse. I try to keep his composure. The fact that the green-haired man was always reserved about his physical appearance made him twice as attractive to the black-haired man, who did not take her eyes off her friend. As time went on, the pair became closer and closer to each other, which pleased Yaoyorozu. However, since that day that they both went to train, which was not just once, a small feeling which the black-haired woman ignored at first, began to get bigger and more annoying when she was with the green-haired man. Yaoyorozu began to feel attracted to the boy. Time later, Izuku had accepted his feelings for Yaoyorozu. This had changed for the better of the boy, worrying more about his appearance every time he met with his friend, becoming more chivalrous and gentle, trying to make his friend laugh more, everything that any man in love would do in order to win the heart of his beloved. However, his love did not justify the enormous number of bags of clothes that he had to carry for her. "We should do this more often," said the black-haired woman in front of him happily, jumping up and down with happiness. "Yeah," laughed the red-haired man, hiding his tiredness with a smile. "Next time we will go buy you clothes, okay?" He stopped halfway to see the black-haired boy. "Okay," she replied, relaxing a little at how happy her friend looked. "Thank you, Izuku," the black-haired woman thanked him, looking into his eyes with a sparkle that hypnotized the green-haired man. "For everything," he said it from the heart. There she was. That was the reason why the green-haired man had fallen for the black-haired woman. That smile that only she knew how to give him, expressing the strong bond of friendship that the pair had formed. Izuku wondered how he could not have fallen in love with the girl before. Dropping the bags without caring what was going to happen to them, the red-haired man pulled his friend into his arms and then kissed her with all the love he felt for her, even if she didn't know it. Yaoyorozu was a little surprised by the boy's sudden action. Knowing that his friend was embarrassed by displays of affection in public, it's not like they were a couple either, she accepted the kiss without complaints, and immediately, the world around her took a back seat. This always happened whenever they both wanted to feel the other, but this time it felt different. The black-haired woman could feel something more, a warm feeling that the green-haired man transmitted to him felt like. Immediately separating from the boy, Yaoyorozu found herself surprised by the unexpected idea in her head. Seeing Izuku's equally surprised eyes, she decided to ignore the ridiculous thought. "I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to me," said the black-haired woman with a sad smile. "Okay, let's go," said the smiling green-haired man, clearly more motivated than before. "Yes," he replied, feeling how the green-haired man took him by one hand, and with the other he carried the amount of bags as if nothing had happened. Again that feeling, Yaoyorozu thought, looking carefully at her. Clasped hands, the black-haired woman's brain began to work at 1,000 per hour in the face of the new dilemma that was presented to her. Would it be wrong? The relationship they both had was not formal at all. They had even decided to keep it a secret as some kind of forbidden love. Even so, anyone who saw them together would think that the two were a couple, given how happy they looked together. But things were not like that. The morning after that night they both shared at the end-of-year party. Both had agreed not to put feelings in between in the relationship they would have, since Yaoyorozu still felt something more than admiration for Todoroki, and Izuku did not feel something as strong as love for the black-haired woman back then. But things changed. Yaoyorozu could tell it. The small and innocent crush he had for Todoroki was over. His relationship with Izuku had made him mature and see things differently. His life became more active, and his heart knew it. It was her head that repeated to her that it was not a good idea, that things were better as they are now, and being the good brainiac that she is, Yaoyorozu preferred to listen to his mind. And then came the problems. Time later. He had waited so long for this moment. Since the day his friend developed his quirk, he had wanted to face him and be victorious, and today he would finally succeed. Without taking his eyes off the blonde in front of him, Izuku activated his quirk, releasing an incredible pressure near him. "I'm going to use it all," he said mentally. "You can feel it, no, Deku?" The blonde provoked him. "That fury that makes you stronger, use it against me. Charge against the red-haired man." "Dash, wait, Bakugu!" Kirishima shouted, trying to stop him. At the same time, A huge pressure passed near him, leaving a trail of dust and dirt instead of the green hair. The two rivals met face to face in the middle of their journey. Bakugo tried to kill Deku with a powerful explosion in his face, but Izuku dodged him easily by doing a pirouette to finish behind the blonde. Once well positioned, the green-haired man threw a punch without measuring his strength to the blonde, who managed to dodge the attack by propelling himself with an explosion. Should we let them fight? Uraraka asked worriedly from the stands. If I see that one of us is trying to kill the other, I will not hesitate to interfere, Ida said with an authoritarian air. Both boys were in the same thing for several minutes. Between attacks and counterattacks, neither had hit a punch. Bakugo had a lot of reflexes, and Izuku was not very fast when he used all his power. It was not until the red-haired man gave only a break to rest that the blonde took the opportunity to create an explosion in his opponent's face. The green-haired man's mask fell apart, and Class 1A felt a great chill when they saw the face that he had been hiding all this time. "Kaken," he roared, not sounding like Izuku himself. His brow could not be furrowed any longer, and his mouth seemed unable to close, showing a countenance of few friends. Yaoyorozu didn't flinch one bit, unlike the rest of the class. "I'm not done yet," said the blonde, pointing with his trigger. "Deku," he roared, letting loose the huge explosion without fear of the consequences. Focused on his anger, the red-haired man threw such a strong blow that it was the power itself that was responsible for disappearing and dispersing the explosion of its rival. Not believing what he saw, the blonde froze in place for a few seconds. It was at that moment that the green-haired man appeared in front of him as if it were magic and hit him on his jaw hard enough to knock him unconscious. "I win," said the red-haired man in his annoyed voice. "Kaken." He felt his hand burn. Believing that everything was over, the red-haired man closed his eyes to rest for a few seconds. Two hands gripped him tightly on the arm with which he hit, and two explosions on his own forearm made him let out a scream of pain. Breathing heavily, Bakugo fell to the ground and tried to get up as fast as his body would allow. However, a presence behind him made him turn around by force, leaning back with his hand raised to let out another explosion. Izuku smashed his fist against the blonde's chest. The force of the impact made his legs extend to the sky. Bakugo was not far behind. The explosion that he released fell squarely on the green-haired man, burning the entire torso part of his suit and leaving some minor burns on his face. His fingers and ears hurt to the point of wanting to bleed. Midoriya. "Bakugo!" I shout, running to see how Kirishima was. Although he could not hear anything his partner was saying, he told him to step aside and that he was fine, getting up and ignoring what the red-haired man was shouting at him. His gaze fell on the black-haired woman who was frowning at him from the stands. Pointing his finger, the green-haired man stopped Jade and screamed. "You continue," he said, looking at her with pain and sorrow over the green hair. Yaoyorozu didn't look a little scared. Getting up and giving herself the luxury of dusting off her clothes, the black-haired woman headed to the battlefield, ready to face the green-haired man. Everyone present was perplexed by the courage of the black-haired woman, not being able to move from their places. The rest could only see. "Why?" asked, looking into her eyes, the red-haired man. "Why what? Midoriya?" He replied as if he were a stranger to the black-haired woman. Gritting his teeth, the green-haired man took a step to approach the black-haired woman. "Why pretend that nothing happened? That it was all a lie?" Izuku shouted furiously. Yaoyorozu frowned and positioned herself to fight. "Are we going to fight or not?" I asked, ignoring the boy's question. She used her quirk to create her staff and shield. Feeling his blood burn, the green-haired man snatched both objects from the black-haired woman only to tear them as if they were paper. "Answer me!" Izuku shouted one step further. Ignoring him again, the black-haired woman continued to create shields and staffs to attack the boy, which ended up destroyed by the impact with the green-haired man's body or were manually destroyed by him. "Tell me!" shouted the green-haired one, already cornering the black-haired woman against the wall of one of the abandoned buildings. The rest of the class had come down from the stands, worried about what the green-haired man might do to the black-haired woman. Now the pair was surrounded as if it were a show. Yaoyorozu swallowed. "Why don't I love you?" shouted the black-haired woman at the top of her lungs, feeling a deep pain in her heart at the same time as she said it. The already fractured heart of the green-haired man was shattered by Yaoyorozu's words. All the anger and sadness he felt during the last weeks vanished along with any positive feelings he felt for the black-haired woman. "I understand," he said, looking into the void of the green hair, opening his way through his gaping classmates. Even Uraraka, the one who tried to stop the poor green hair, was carelessly pushed aside. Everyone present didn't know what to do. At first they came down with the intention of supporting Yaoyorozu. However, the atmosphere that had been created now seemed to have completely affected everyone's mood. Like Izuku, the black-haired woman left without saying a word. That day many of the students at the academy were talking about a black-haired woman who seemed to be running away from something. Or someone with tears in her eyes. "You said you didn't feel anything," Tsuyu said, disappointed and tired. "I know, but I try to make up an excuse. Uraraka told me that lately he has been down," the girl informed him. "Look, I'm trying, but it's the black-haired woman wanted to explain herself. "Just talk to him," she spoke in an irritated tone. "Staying quiet will make things worse," Tsuyu reasoned. "I can." Sob no. After ignoring it for so long, she began to feel tears coming. "I really can't understand you," said the girl, sounding more irritated than annoyed. "You knew he had feelings for you," she began to speak. Yaoyorozu moved her cell phone away a little, hoping that her friend wouldn't hear the small sigh full of sadness that he let out. "If you had been honest with yourself, I bet they'd be the happiest couple in high school," Tsuyu continued. Unable to contain herself any longer, the black-haired woman began to shed tears, unable to refute all the truth that her friend was telling her. "Even if you talk to him now, you'd be lucky if I even see you as a friend." Almost a month had passed since the conversation she had had with Tsuyu, in which she questioned her about her feelings for the greenhead, confused that the blackhead had been avoiding the greenhead at all costs, not being able to bear the amount of emotions that he provoked in her. Izuku had tried to ask her why she was doing it, but she was just making excuses to get out of the situation. It's been a week since the red-haired man even spoke to him, and it had taken that for Yaoyorozu to finally realize it. "Yaoyorozu?" Tsuyu called him. "Are you there?" she asked worriedly. The black-haired girl heard her friend call her for a few minutes, but her sobs prevented her from speaking clearly, her moistened eyes did not let her see, and the pulsating pain in her heart did not allow her to think. "I ruined everything." Time later. Yaoyorozu felt empty, as if she were alone in the universe. She ignored everyone. She missed classes. She was not herself. Since the incident of the duels, the black-haired woman has done nothing but lock herself in her room and feel melancholy and miserable. Izuku, on the other hand, did not pass him so differently from the black-haired woman at first. He had stopped going for a while to train. That was already something drastic, knowing him well. There were also times when he forgot to eat or even go to the academy. However, Izuku was not defeated by negativity. After a private chat with Uraraka and Ida, his two best friends after his death, she, the green-haired one, found the support she needed at the right time. Little by little, the boy began to return to being the altruistic and determined Izuku of before. Even the simple fact of having it close caused pain to the red-haired man, and not only because it seemed that she was the one who was having a worse time than him, something that made no sense since he was the one who ended up heartbroken, he had to do something about it. After a long talk with the director, Nedzu, about the inconvenience he had, Izuku discovered that the academy had thought years ago to start a program of expansion worldwide. Unfortunately, the project was abandoned due to a lack of student interest. "Let me try," said the red-haired man. "Well, these are the requirements." The rodent handed him a piece of paper. Stretching the paper, Izuku almost fainted at the sight of the amount of things that the different hero schools from foreign countries asked of him. It would be a feat to complete so many requirements. Maybe he could ask Yaoi for help. The red-haired man stopped half thinking. It was true that with the help of the black-haired woman, the program would have been made a lot easier for Izuku, but he decided not to bother her. And then the red-haired man went through what he would call the hellish weeks for the rest of his life. The poor thing about staying up late, about stress and exhaustion. But he succeeded, and now here he was, with the accepted paper in one hand and the other squeezing the hand of his director, accepting his congratulations. Are you sure you don't want the school to recognize your achievement, son? Netsu asked a little sadly. I'm satisfied with knowing that you make it, Mr. Director, said the red-haired man with a smile. Well, it will be as you wish. The rodent raised his thumb in approval. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Izuku bows respectfully. Thanks to you, son, Netsu also bowed. For your great effort, he sounded proudly. I'll be going then, said the red-haired man, heading for the exit. Please don't forget our agreement, he asked, a little embarrassed. My mouth is sealed, son, the director gestured with his hands. If everything went as Izuku planned, maybe this one could work things out between her and the... A new day was beginning. Two people of different genders were getting up earlier than usual, each for different reasons. The first one did it to do his typical routine, but unlike other days, this one performed his exercises with a smile and even letting out small giggles from time to time. Just as the boy had just gone out to perform his series of exercises, the door of the second morning person opened, preventing them from seeing each other. The second one got up early to have breakfast alone, something she had been doing for a while now. The girl's face was flat and without color, similar to that of an emotionless android. His expression didn't change at any time. His breakfast left a bad taste in his mouth. Once his training was over, the boy had breakfast, the most exquisite dish he had ever tasted, although it only consisted of eggs and rice. Prepared for anything, the boy took out his old and reliable notebook, ready to make the list that he had planned yesterday. Returning to the young woman, she had fallen asleep at the kitchen table, waking up seconds later thanks to the gravity that caused her chair to fall next to her. The lady sighed wearily on the floor, whispered a really, and then headed to her room. Finishing writing a letter with great care, the young man began to pack his things without any hurry, enjoying the memories that came to him every time he put something in his suitcase. The girl had gone to bed again, returning to the dream world where she could enjoy the warmth that her beloved used to give her. The boy dressed elegantly, with a suit that fit him and matched the huge smile he had been wearing since he woke up. Ready to continue with his list, the young man took his luggage and sighed melancholy when he saw the door of his room. Some tears threatened to escape, but the boy remained strong. He had cried enough he could no longer afford it. Continuing on his way, the young man stopped in front of the door of his loyal and good friend Ida, smiling at the memories he had with the speedster. Whether good or bad, his friend would always be the same strict but sensitive president of his class. The boy continued to remember the moments he spent with his classmates as he advanced. Meanwhile, the young woman lying on her bed seemed unable to rest comfortably, moving from one side to the other in her dreams as if something was bothering her. She whispered someone's name with her eyes closed, hoping that the aforementioned would come to comfort her as he used to do. Arriving at his best friend's door, the young man laughed when he remembered the number of moments he had spent with Uraraka. He knew the feelings she had for him. He appreciated them and would treasure them no matter how far away he was. The girl was someone important to him. The boy slipped the letter that he had written to him. It seems as if you are going to escape and never come back, said a familiar voice in front of the boy. Todoroki, the young man shouted in surprise, covering his mouth quickly to avoid waking his companions. They both remained silent for a few seconds, Todoroki leaning against the door of his room and the boy in front of him firm as a rock, trembling, but with a nervous smile. Take care of yourself, Midoriya, said Todoroki with a smile, an action that surprised the boy with the suitcases. Just as he was about to get into his room, wait, Todoroki, the young man called him, could I ask you for a favor? I asked determinedly. Todoroki was not a person to make promises, much less to do charity and feel sorry for others. At most he could feel compassion for another, but no more even so. What? Todoroki asked, accepting the assignment that he would leave him. A very important one. Returning to the sleeping girl, she seemed only to worsen in her nightmares, having only brief moments of peace in which she genuinely slept. I would have liked to say goodbye to Kaken, thought the young man, already heading for the exit of the dormitories, although it would probably have ended in a chase. He smiled a little amused by the attitude his friend had. The moment the boy passed through the room, the smile he had had since he got up vanished instantly. Watching their memories flash by as if they were ghosts from the past, the boy turned to look at the corridor on his left where his past I knocked on her door, and she opened the door with a smile just as illuminated as him. Swallowing hard enough, the boy walked to the door. He raised his hand, tempted to touch it just like his old self, who was about to do it. Inside the room, the young woman gradually stopped moving uncomfortably due to the nightmares. She began to breathe slowly and calmly. She began to feel safe and calm as if he were close. Opening her eyes slowly, Yaoyorozu stood up in surprise, and by pure impulse she went to the entrance of her room, feeling that someone was outside. The black-haired woman remained pensive for a few seconds while holding the doorknob. A small ray of hope formed inside her, and after a few seconds it opened. Izuku. I mentioned the black-haired woman, even though the corridor is empty. Making sure that there was indeed no one around, the black-haired woman's face fell when she closed her door. Izuku exhaled silently from the ceiling of the corridor, letting himself fall carefully. The sweat of nerves ran down his back. That was close, thought the green-haired man. I couldn't do it, I wasn't ready. Once outside the dormitory building, Izuku saw on his list that it was the following. A smile was drawn on his face. Inko Midoriya's apartment. It had been a while since the green-haired man had visited his mother. The boy couldn't help but feel a little nervous and happy to know how he had done in her absence. Without wasting any more time, Izuku took out the key from the door and took a deep breath before turning the knob. "I'm home," shouted as usual the red-haired man. "I Izuku?" Her mother's cry was heard. Appearing in the corridor of their home, the mother of the green-haired man stood still as she watched her son from head to toe. Izuku smiled warmly at her and left his things on the ground, anticipating what was coming. "Hi Mom," he said at the same time that he was tackled by his mother in a family hug. His mother answered him, somehow, while she buried her face in her son's chest. The red-haired man returned the hug with the same affection as his mother. "I miss you, Izuku," said the little woman between sobs, moving away to take her son's face in her hands. "Me too," said the green-haired man, feeling warm. Once the greetings were over, the two green-haired people went to the kitchen, where Izuku's mother prepared tea for him, as he liked it, and she asked him the reason for his visit, only to contradict himself later by saying that there was no reason to come to his home. "I'm leaving the city," said the red-haired man in a muffled voice, knowing how his mother was going to react. "On an excursion? Study trip?" I asked, even not understanding what his son was referring to. Normally the high school always took them on excursions. Feeling guilty for not telling him sooner, Izuku hesitated between telling him the truth or keeping them a secret. "No more secrets," he said, determined to tell his mother everything. "For a scholarship that high school gave me, I inform her," seeing with determination the red-haired man. His mother's happy face changed to one of confusion and surprise. Izuku decided to continue with his explanation so that she would understand the situation she was in. "I'm going to travel through different countries like the image of the US. His mother's face began to darken. "You don't know how many years I'll be away." I finished speaking. Raising his gaze, the green-haired man looked at his mother's dull face. He knew that the decision he had made was going to displease many people, one of whom was his mother. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" Inko asked, feeling hurt. "I asked the director to keep it a secret for a reason," said the red-haired man, feeling bad for not having told him. Personal images of her appeared. "I'm your mother, Izuku. I speak to her with determination. I think I deserve to know what's going on with my son," he demanded. Clenching his fists, the red-haired man prepared to recapitulate the painful memories that he was trying to ignore. "And then I speak." Meanwhile in high school, the noise of a lot of voices talking woke Uraraka awake, stretching while yawning. The brunette got up sleepily from her bed because she had just woken up. Uraraka did not notice the letter that was lying near her door. Not noticing the note, the brunette stepped on the letter, and her walk caused the letter to be under her sandwich table. "Yon, what's going on?" the chestnut asked tiredly, opening her door to see the scandal outside. "Oh Uraraka?" Kyoka called him, who was also addressing the origin of the voices. "Apparently something is wrong with Midoriya, or so I heard," he said, rubbing his ears because of how loudly his companions were talking. Hearing her friend's name immediately woke up the brunette, the green-haired man, and she hadn't exchanged many words lately because of how busy her friends seemed to be lately. Not to mention the issue of the secret relationship between him and Yaoyorozu. Deku? Uraraka asked strangely, feeling a hunch. Kyoka nodded, and they both headed to the boys' room. Almost all the members of the class were around the green-haired man's room. Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Bakugu were the only ones absent. The others muttered with strange faces the situation that had been created. Maybe he hasn't come back from his training yet? Kirishima spoke. I heard that the man takes his routine very seriously, he said, not sure of himself. It's a possibility, Fumikage replied, with his arms crossed as always. What's going on here? Uraraka asked curiously, calling everyone's attention. It's Midoriya, Tsuyu replied, making his way through the crowd to go to the brunette. He was nowhere to be found, so we thought he would be in his room, but Uraraka still couldn't process what was happening, but hearing that his friend was missing was already strange. Usually the ones who always lifted first were him, Ida, and Yaoyorozu. Even when the incident of duels passed, these three were always the first to lift. Maybe it came out? Say, why so much scandal for his absence? Kaminari spoke, a little confused by the attitude of his companions. That's why Todoroki said, Shiro reported, adding to the conversation. What did he say? Uraraka asked, beginning to feel worried. An awkward silence accompanied by the darkening of his companions' faces made the brunette even more nervous. What was really going on? I said he left. Todoroki spoke from behind the chestnut, joining the group. Where? Uraraka asked fearfully, hoping that the answer was not what she feared. He left high school, said the boy dryly, cold as his quirk. Uraraka wishes I hadn't woken up that day. With Izuku. And that's more or less what the F happened. I finished telling the story of the red-haired one. Then, I see, she replied, trying to process all the information her son had given her. Izuku was looking forward to being swallowed up by the ground. Telling him about his past relationship with Yaoyorozu was painful but most of all shameful. The boy had to explain to his mother the term friends with rights, since she did not know the type of lexicon that his generation handled. Then, Inko decided to speak. The tea trip is an excuse not to have to see it? Wonder. Yes, he replied, recovering a little from his nervousness. Sigh, in that case, I'm against you leaving Izuku, his mother spoke firmly. The green-haired man's face changed to one of surprise. After telling him the story of how his heart was broken, his mother still did not approve of his decision. Perhaps no one could understand the great pain that. Even so, Inko continued, I'm always going to support you no matter Izuku because you are my son. She smiled at him maternally. His face of surprise changed to one of sorrow as I could doubt he thought. Feeling how tears wanted to come out this time, he did not keep them to himself. His mother's words had touched him. I'm so sorry. Tears fell into his cup of tea that I didn't know what else to do, said the red-haired man helplessly. His mother got up from her chair to approach him and give him a hug, resting her head on her son's, trying to heal the wounds he had. I'm proud of you, Izuku, his mother told him, happy to know that her son changed the world. Once his tears stopped, the red-haired man was ready to continue on his way. Having to separate from his mother, he promised her that no matter how much he would visit her again and that from now on, Izuku would contact her more often. One more thing, Izuku, I talked to him before his mother leaves. Yes? Asked the green-haired man strangely. They had already talked about everything. There was nothing more to discuss, but I think you should have a talk with that girl. Inko looked at him determined. The green-haired man's heart began to beat. In the bedrooms. Deku? The chestnut called him while knocking on his door. Are you there, Deku? I asked naively. Should we break down the door? Kirishima asked with a smile. Really? Ashido looked at him disapprovingly. It's just an option. Hee, laughed amused and manly the red-haired man. I think it would be better to ask ourselves why he left instead of arguing whether to kick down his door or not, said Ojiro in an obvious tone. Those who want to discuss why Midoriya left, raise your hand, said Mineta, calling everyone's attention. Those who don't raise it will be assumed to be on the side of wanting to kick down the door. All the women and men, except for Satu, Kirishima, and Kaminari, raised their hands, the three who did not receive confused looks. I was just kidding. I thought it would be funny, Satu excused. I'm sorry, don't pay much attention to what Mineta said, could you repeat it? Kaminari said Kyoka hit him on the head. Am I the only one who wants to break down the door? The reddish man asked with a nervous smile. Yes, said absolutely everyone, intimidating the boy a little. What the fuck is going on here? Bakugu shouted, kicking out of his room. Mineta flew away because he was in front of this. I already told you that he left, it wouldn't make sense to destroy his door, said Todoroki heavily. Almost everyone began to murmur and talk about how right the boy was. Todoroki was not someone who seemed to be a liar. Don't ignore me, you half-and-half bastard. The blonde approached him annoyed. I see why Midoriya left without saying goodbye. Todoroki looked at him irritably. You immaturity would have been a nuisance. I discredited him, what was it that you said damn? The blonde took him by the shirt. Relax Bakubro. I'm sure he didn't mean it. Right Todoroki? The redhead asked, getting a little nervous. Todoroki only let out a tisk that angered one more blonde, just when one was already creating his explosions and the other was calling Uraraka. Could you stop fighting? I scold the chestnut, Deku is missing, and the only thing they think about is fighting. She shouted angrily. Both boys separated, looking the other way. Bakugu was curious about what the chestnut was saying. Like Deku left. What are you talking about, angel face? The blonde demanded answers, approaching the brunette. He's not answering my calls either, Uraraka said worriedly, holding her cell phone with the missed 6th call. Stop ignoring me. The blonde roared annoyed, creating small explosions in his hands. I tell you that we should break down your door. Maybe he's passed out or something. Everyone present looked bored at Kirishima again. Uraraka turned pale at the red-haired man's words. Well done, Kirishima, now we have 2 problems. Kaminari was annoyed, seeing how the group of girls tried to calm the brunette. All this is because of the useless Deku? Said the blonde irritably, what is wrong with the damned man? I asked the redhead. Apparently he disappeared, no one has seen him since yesterday but Todoroki, Kirishima informed him. But what stupid things are you saying? Deku. Bakugu knocked on his door, annoyed. Open it for me or I'll force my way in. I shout, knocking in desperation. Calm down a little, buddy. At this rate, you are really going to break down the door, the redhead recommended. What does this mean? Ida said authoritatively from the beginning of the corridor. Ida. Uraraka shouted, approaching the black-haired man to tell him the situation. Deku left, what do you mean? Ida asked confused. I'm going to get enough in. Bakugu shouted furiously. You wait Bakubro. The redhead tried to stop him. It was too late. The blonde raised his hands, ready to get to the bottom of everything. His teammates backed away or threw themselves to the ground, waiting for the explosion that was coming. But nothing happened. Kirishima said, protecting himself with his hardened arms. Bakugu, I call him, seeing that he is no longer in the corridor. It took a few seconds for him to notice what had really happened. With their faces full of surprise and horror, the members of Class 1A could not believe what they saw. Instead of destroying the door with an explosion, the blonde had entered normally. What does this mean? The blonde was heard screaming from inside. Without wasting any more time, Uraraka made his way past Ida to be able to see what Bakugu was referring to. Todoroki was right. Izuku was gone. And with him, a part of Uraraka too. With Izuku. Hello Izuku. Are you coming to see, sir? Bubble Girl asked, smiling from behind her desk. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. The green-haired man bowed respectfully. You don't have to worry. Maybe he won't say it, but the girl approached him to whisper to him. Here between us, I think it will serve. He smiled mischievously. It's not good to talk about our boss behind his back. Mirio hit him on the head, piercing the wall behind him. How are you, Midoriya? How is the academy doing? He joined the conversation. Izuku smiled at the attitude of his 2 companions. The green-haired man had been in the care of Sir's industry for a long time, It was impossible not to have related to the members of his organization. Everything is fine, senpai. The academy is still the same as always, smiled the red-haired man. It's good to hear that. Why is your visit? Mirio asked. I hate you so much, she said while rubbing her bubble girl's head. Izuku hesitated to tell them the truth. After all, he hadn't even told his own classmates since, said the red-haired man mentally. After all, it wasn't long before he left the city. Midoriya is going to leave the city, said Sir, opening the door of his office. Mirio and Bubble Girl made surprised faces at what their boss said. Izuku had completely forgotten Sir's quirk. Technically, he had already seen it coming 2 years ago. Is that true? Mirio asked, doubting his boss for the first time. It's true, Izuku confirmed, lowering his gaze a little. It would have been fun to have someone else to talk to. Mirio isn't? Again, the girl was silenced by a blow to her head. Come with me, Midoriya. I have something to tell you, he said, opening the door for Sir to enter. It was funny how Izuku ended up being the one who had to listen to what Sir had to say to him when Sir had come with the intention of him listening to him. Sitting down in the only chair in his office, the green-haired man began to get nervous. If Sir had already seen this coming, then there was nothing to discuss. Truth? Let me tell you that I'm disappointed in you, Midoriya, he said as soon as the black-haired man had sat down. Woman, he said incredulously. Izuku was silent. He was also disappointed in himself. His mother also told him, however, because when he spoke in such a way about Yaoyorozu, he felt anger towards his mentor. Adding the fact that you waste the opportunity one gave you to work here, continued Sir. In fact, some time ago Sir had offered him a position in his organization for his great performance as a hero, showing him why All Might had chosen him as his successor. Izuku had planned to take the job, but things changed. I have no words to explain how frustrating this is for me. The black-haired man adjusted his glasses. Sir Yo, I try to speak. But the man in the suit made a sign with his hand. He began to laugh. The black-haired man, surprising Izuku as much as he could, raised his voice. Sir? I asked him, confused by his laughter and the green hair. What Midoriya wanted to tell you was to ask you if the decision you make is final, Sir asked, looking him in the eyes. It is, the red-haired man replied immediately. Thanks to his mother, Izuku could now see things with determination. Sir sighed and rose from his seat, a smile forming on his face. All might have made a good choice, said the black-haired man, smiling genuinely. Congratulations on becoming the UA ambassador, Deku. He held out his hand. Forgetting everything the black-haired man had said before, Izuku stood up and shook his mentor's hand with a big smile. Thank you, sir, said the red-haired man. It was a pleasure to be in charge of you, he thanked him. The black-haired man only smiled at him and saw how he bent down to say goodbye. Sir couldn't help but have to tell him something he'd seen in his future. Midoriya, he called before he left. She wasn't a mistake, the black-haired man told him. For the second time in the day, Izuku felt his heart feel something more than just melancholy again. In high school. Do you repeat me because this is not necessary? Yaoyorozu asked, totally confused. The black-haired woman was sitting in one of the armchairs in the living room with all her classmates around her. Am I still asleep? He wondered if she had managed to have a moment of tranquility after a long time in her room until numerous knocks on her door took her out of that Eden in which she was. We suspect you have something to do with Midoriya's disappearance, Ida spoke for everyone. If it's not too much of a nuisance, I would like to know your point of view of what he told me. He asked for an explanation. So if you told them, Yaoyorozu thought. She already suspected that the green-haired man had told his two best friends about his relationship, thanks to Uraraka, who had been distant and curt with her lately. Sai, what do you want to know? The black-haired woman asked with her head down. Why? Uraraka shouted, approaching the black-haired woman. Why did you have to reject him? She asked pained. Yaoyorozu really didn't need this. Couldn't Uraraka notice the pain she felt? From one girl to another in love, the black-haired woman thought that she would understand him. However, the chestnut seemed to be blind when it came to her. How the F could you reject someone as bad as Izuku? I try to see the Lodge La Castana. And look, if you already know what you had, then I don't need to explain to you, do you? The black-haired woman asked nervously. I was really putting up with so much. According to the information that Midoriya confided to us, Ida spoke. They both had an agreement not to put feelings in the middle, otherwise, their alliance would end, wouldn't it? The black-haired man looked into his eyes. Everyone who had no knowledge about what had happened between the two young men began to understand what Ida was talking about. That's right, he replied without daring to look at the black-haired woman. Here comes my question then. The black-haired man prepared himself. If from the beginning that was the agreement, why was it only Midoriya that ended badly? Wonder. It doesn't matter if I tell you, thought the black-haired woman, ready to tell everyone the truth. He wasn't the only one that he was injured, he said. Seeing the black-haired man, his eyes reflected pain and sadness. Ida managed to complete the puzzle. You loved him, Uraraka interrupted. His annoyed attitude changed to a calmer one. Yes, said the black-haired woman, clenching her fists because of how silly she was. Everyone present without exception made a sound of surprise at the big reveal of the black hair. Hagakure fainted. It seemed that way since his floating clothes were on the ground. I would have endured you being with him, said Uraraka, looking into the eyes of the black-haired woman. But I can't forgive you for what you did. He walked away and then left. You wait. I tried to stop her for some reason, Yaoyorozu. Thank you for explaining it to me, Yaoyorozu. Now I understand the reason for his disappearance. The black-haired man thanked him with a dull face. And it's not there? But V'll come back, right? Asked the black-haired woman, feeling scared. She could bear the pain, but there was no way that she could be without him. I don't know, no one knows, Ida informed him, leaving like the chestnut. Everyone watched as the president of the class left without further ado. Out of their sight, everyone turned to look at the black-haired wing, waiting for her to do something, but Yaoyorozu didn't know what to do. Little by little, everyone began to leave, some with a face of pity and others with disapproval. Yaoyorozu was left alone again. With the green hair in her mind, the young woman went to her room with nothing else to do. It's not my business, but Todoroki spoke, leaning against the corridor. You should talk to Uraraka and Ida, he recommended. Lowering her gaze, the black-haired woman didn't know if they even wanted to see her, knowing that because of her, Izuku was gone. You may have made a mistake in the past, began Todoroki. But you can still write your future, he told her before entering his room. Why are you helping me? Asked the black-haired woman, surprised. Her partner was not someone who is very motivating. Why don't I like to break promises? Todoroki told her, leaving the black-haired woman confused. He's right, said the black-haired woman. The last few weeks she had done nothing but lock herself in her room and cry, maybe even apologizing for the loss of the red-haired woman so she could get some blame. Yaoyorozu went determined to Ida's room, willing to write her future. With Izuku. That's what happens when you get involved with women, brat. Grand Torino scolded him. Toshinori would have told you the same thing. I chewed a cookie. Again, the same feeling that he felt when Sir spoke in such a way about Yaoyorozu was present in the green-haired man. There were only 2 stops left on his list. The house in Gran Torino was one of them. But if heroes don't have family, how would the balance be maintained? Izuku asked, trying not to sound rude. Not everyone who owns a quirk is a hero, is it? The old man asked, sounding obvious forget about it, brat. Having a family is a point against when you are a hero. I speak as if he already knew the subject. Until now everyone had told him the same thing. However, her mother and Sir always ended up telling her that her relationship with Yaoyorozu hadn't been bad. I had only been unlucky, that's all. Gran Torino, on the other hand, did not seem to approve of the young man's decision at all. I understand, said the red-haired man, getting up from the old man's unwelcoming armchair. It was good to see you, Mr. Torino. Goodbye, he said respectfully. Goodbye, child coughed. He moved his wheelchair to turn to see Torino. Ready to leave, the green-haired man began to doubt his actions as he approached the exit of the apartment. Maybe you don't need to talk to her after all. Child. The old man called him. Forget what I told you and find someone worthwhile. He said it with a smile from ear to ear. Of all the acquaintances Izuku had, Gran Torino would always be the one that was most difficult for him to understand. It may not be the right thing for a hero, continued the retired hero, but it is a unique and unforgettable experience. He made a sign with his farewell hands. Izuku no longer had any doubts. His relationship with Yaoyorozu had not been a mistake. It never had been. In academia, apologizing to Ida had been relatively easy. Yaoyorozu only had to tell him what he felt and ask for forgiveness later. The black-haired man accepted his apology and wished him luck with Uraraka. There came the problems. The brunette never opened the door for her. She told him that if he was going to apologize, he should do it to Izuku and not to her. Even so, Yaoyorozu apologized with a closed door and everything, hoping that she would forgive him one day. "Is it already night?" said the black-haired woman, seeing how the sky had darkened so quickly. Feeling a little better than before, the black-haired woman decided to make herself something quick in the kitchen and then go to bed. Although in her mind she is still worried about Izuku's whereabouts, Yaoyorozu knew that it was the best thing if they both stopped seeing each other for a while. But what a big lie that was. What the black-haired woman wanted most at that moment was to be able to ask for forgiveness from the green-haired man, tell him how much she loved him, and maybe with a little hope to be friends again. "Tomorrow will be another day," the black-haired woman said to herself before lying down on her spacious bed. Caressing the side where he used to sleep when the two met, Yaoyorozu managed to sleep peacefully once again. City Airport, midnight. Sitting down and with his ticket in hand, the red-haired man was staring at the screen of his cell phone for approximately 5 minutes. 10 missed calls, the red-haired man read in his mind. Uraraka, the red-haired man felt bad. Maybe the letter was too much, the red-haired man thought, blushing. Sigh, a call can't do harm, said Izuku, putting the cell phone to his ear. Today. Her friend answered instantly. "Hello, Uraraka," replied the red-haired man nervously. Where are you? Are you okay?" "But what am I asking?" "Of course you're not well," said the brunette non-stop and in a loud voice. Izuku had to move his cell phone away a little for the sake of his ears. "I'm fine, hee," the red-haired man said calmly. "I'm at the airport. You're supposed to know that by now," confusion in his voice. "How do you expect me to know where you are? You left without saying. You didn't even leave a note or..." Uraraka began to speak stressed. "And didn't you read the letter I left you?" the reddish man asked strangely. "See letter?" asked the chestnut, calming down a little. "I haven't seen any letter in my..." The chestnut's eyes were fixed on the tip of what seemed to be a sheet of paper. Ignoring what his friend was saying on his cell phone, Uraraka opened the envelope and began to read while listening to his friend. If you can't find it, I can tell you myself," said the red-haired man, swallowing all the shame he felt. "Dear Uraraka, thank you so much for being my friend all these years. I know it can be a little embarrassing to have someone as nervous and anxious as me by my side, yet you and Ida accepted me as I am. I'd be lying if I said I never felt anything for you. I regret not having reciprocated your feelings. I never thought I would end up falling in love with someone like Yaoyorozu. I always imagined her as on some kind of unreachable pedestal. I was wrong. Maybe she doesn't love me, and that's okay. I accept it, even if it hurts a lot. I would like you to come to the city airport next to Ida at 2:30 in the morning. I regret the time. There were no other flights available that left today, so that I can properly say goodbye to you. Please just come and do it in stealth. I don't want Kaken to end up destroying an airplane or worse. The next time we meet, would you have a date with me?" he said to the green-haired man on his cell phone at the same time that Uraraka finished reading the letter. The tears had started to come out for a while now. Uraraka brought her cell phone and said, "We'll be there," she said cheerfully before the red-haired man even answered her. Uraraka threw her cell phone as hard as she could on the floor. Wiping away tears and swallowing saliva, Uraraka put the letter in her pocket and left her room ready to settle accounts with a certain black hair. After what was told in episode 1, the dispute had already been going on for about half an hour. Neither seemed to want to lose, and at the same time, none seemed to be thinking clearly. The two were simply charging at each other to hit each other. "I think enough was enough," said Tsuyu, beginning to feel bad for her two friends, both beaten and clearly tired. "I'm going to interfere. I can't take this anymore," Ida said, adjusting her robe, ready to end the fight. "Wait, Ida. Look, Kirishima said, pointing to the two girls lying on the grass panting. I can't take it anymore. The two of them thought in unison that Uraraka might have the upper hand when it came to hand-to-hand combat, but Yaoyorozu's constant handling of weapons balanced things out by keeping her away. Now the two of them were looking at each other as they stood up a short distance from each other. It all happened very quickly. Yaoyorozu received a powerful hook on her right cheek, and Uraraka felt how her head moved from side to side from the blow of the black-haired woman's staff, which she had created at the last second, small but hard as iron. Despite such strong blows, none of them had fallen unconscious. They only ended up lying on the ground. Call recovery girl. They both heard Ida scream. The black-haired man approached the two girls. But it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Kaminari said, confused. Uraraka began to get up with difficulty when he heard what his companion had said. Uraraka. Take it easy. There is no reason why. I try to give help to the black-haired one. We have to go to the airport, he said, managing to get up with his legs like jelly. Deku is waiting for us, he said, enduring the pain he felt. What are you talking about? We have to take you to Kuro. I think you refer to this. Yaoyorozu sat at him, handing him the letter that Izuku had written to him. The black-haired man took it confused and began to read it in silence. Uraraka made a sound of contempt as she looked at him hatefully. I found her lying on the floor, said the black-haired woman, standing up completely thanks to a staff she had created to support herself. We have to be there, said the brunette, beginning to feel tired. Were her last words before falling asleep. Ida, Tsuyu called him from behind, go to the airport, we'll take care of Uraraka, smiled confidently. Why I try to articulate the black-haired word. Leave it to us, said Todoroki, smiling at his president. Well, I'll say goodbye to Midoriya for the whole class. The black-haired man felt motivated. I think you should go too, Yaoyorozu, Todoroki told her, turning to see the injured black-haired wing. I agree with Todoroki, something tells me you should go. Tsuyu smiled genuinely. The black-haired girl began to cry because of how well her classmates behaved with her. With so much moral support, Yaoyorozu was willing to fix things with her friends. Wait! Bakugo shouted, approaching them, take me 4 eyes too. Deku is where you will go, isn't it? Take me or I'll kill you. The blonde didn't finish speaking. Bakugo's entire body froze instantly. Inside the piece of ice, small explosions threatened to break the blonde man's icy prison. I've always wanted to do that, said Todoroki. Well then, Yaoyorozu, get on and hold on tight. Ida started his engines. This won't take too long. The sprinter began to light up. Izuku is coming, he thought as he climbed on the back of his companion Yaoyorozu. At the airport. Maybe they won't come after all, thought the green-haired man, letting out a sigh of sadness. Without waiting any longer, Izuku got up from the chair he was in and went to take his flight, which was already queuing to board. As the queue went on, the green-haired man's mind began to pass images of him and his friend. The first time they spoke that morning before the others came to the classroom. The training sessions that both spent watching the beach. The many sleepovers in which they woke up early chatting about literary works and discussing which pop song was the best of the month. How magical their first kiss and love encounter had been that end-of-semester party. The dozens of times when the two met secretly to be able to feel each other, May's scene. The Toga incident that helped the red-haired man realize his feelings. That night when he accompanied him shopping, the red-haired man swore to feel that she loved him too. They were good times, said the red-haired man with a smile. His heart was now completely healed. Smiling once more, the green-haired man turned once more to see if someone would come, but no one came. What kind of person would put a flight at 2 in the morning? He thought a little annoyed. Ready to take over, the red-haired man stopped in his tracks when he thought he saw All Might pass behind him in his original form. I need to sleep, he thought. And then it happened. Midoriya. A voice known to the boy shouted at the top of his lungs. Standing still, Izuku turned to look at the entrance of the airport, which had been partially destroyed, but that didn't matter. Ida had come to see him. Apparently Uraraka too, seeing that he seemed to be carrying someone on his back. Mr. Tickets, please, the Aeromosa called him. Excuse me. Could you give me 5 minutes? asked the green-haired man, feeling happy. Sigh, just for being from the US. Once one of his graduates saved a relative. The woman smiled understandingly. Thank you very much. Feeling reluctant, the green-haired man activated his quirk and sped to the place where Ida had stopped. Feeling his heart pounding, Izuku met the black-haired man in the place where he had been sitting waiting for a while. Ida, greeted the green-haired man, approaching his friend. Did I thank you so much for coming? The red-haired man smiled at him as much as he could. I couldn't call me your friend if I missed your farewell, he smiled back. The green-haired man extended his hand as a symbol of farewell, to which Ida responded with a hug from shoulder to shoulder. Despite the fact that they were both almost equally tall, the green-haired man found himself being carried as if nothing were at stake. That reminds me, he said, starting to move his black hair. I hope Uraraka's replacement is to your liking. The black-haired man stepped aside, revealing a black-haired crook sitting behind him. The green-haired man's heart began to beat strongly. All the feelings he felt for the black-haired woman seemed to want to bloom again. But what happened to you? I asked, approaching the black-haired woman, forgetting all nervousness or bad memory of the green-haired man. Why I fought? Replied the black-haired woman with a nervous smile. An awkward silence formed between the two until the green-haired man started laughing, amused by his friend's response. Yaoyorozu was a little surprised, but then she joined the boy, unable to avoid how contagious his laughter was. Excuse me, sir, I'm afraid you'll have to come with me, said a policeman along with 4 others behind Ida. Sigh, it was good to see you, Midoriya. Take care. Ida shook her hand. Goodbye, Ida, you take care of yourself too, said the green-haired man. Ida left with the policeman, leaving the 2 young men alone. Yaoyorozu was the first to speak. I'm sorry, said the black-haired woman looking into his eyes with pity. I'm sorry that all this is my fault. I'm sorry that I made you pretend to, she was interrupted. Apologies accepted, said the green-haired man, hugging her tightly. I should have followed the treaty and not put feelings in the way, he blamed himself. Feeling his heart squeeze, Yaoyorozu began to shed tears at his friend's words. I want you to know that even if things get strange between us, I don't want to stop having you in my life, he confessed. The black-haired woman couldn't do anything but cry. Izuku was truly the gentlest person she had ever met in her life. It doesn't matter as a friend, this time it was him who was interrupted. I love you, said the black-haired woman between sobs. Please don't go, I beg her. The red-haired man couldn't say a word. What Yaoyorozu had said to him was heard so real. I love you, Izuku, I always did. He continued speaking. I was afraid of changing things. I was so satisfied with our false relationship that I didn't want to risk it, he interrupted boldly. I love you too, replied the red-haired man, separating himself from the hug to look into her eyes. I love you too, Momo. Despite the wounds and how much the bruises on the black-haired woman's face hurt, she ignored all those details when the green-haired man joined his lips with hers, feeling how she returned to who she was before, all thanks to him. Even so, said the green-haired man, separating himself from the black-haired woman. I have to go, Yaoyorozu. His face changed to one of sadness. How was it possible that from feeling pure happiness and love it went on to only feeling fear and sadness? Izuku and I-T to invent something, but not even the smartest of the class could have an idea at that moment. Please understand, said the red-haired man. I can't turn back anymore. The green-haired man put his foreheads together. Sir, it's about time, sniff, said the flight attendant, who had been watching the whole scene. Don't hold yourself back for me, he said and then kissed his forehead, the red-haired man. Yaoyorozu didn't say a word, he couldn't. Seeing how the love of his life turned for the last time to smile at him before passing through that door that would take him very far, Yaoyorozu said too late. Goodbye, Izuku, he said in a whisper. Because between geniuses there can be no love. I'll see you soon, he replied as if he had heard Izuku. Or is it? The noisy alarm of her alarm clock forced the disheveled black-haired woman to get up, turning off the device in an unorthodox way, with a staff that she created so she wouldn't have to stretch. Yaoyorozu moved around her apartment with her eyes covered by her hair. All the way she made to the kitchen for something to drink she did with a totally neutral face. Her thirst quenched, The girl yawned enormously and prepared to return to her room, tidying up her very refined and expensive bed. The black-haired woman began to hum a song with a smile. Having finished, Yaoyorozu prepared for her daily routine, ready to face a new day. But first, hello, he heard his voice from his cell phone. Even though she couldn't see him, she knew he was smiling. Good morning, Yaoyorozu replied with a smile. It was these little moments that she treasured. It's not a bad time, or is it? Wonder. Dational. Okay, I had already woken up a while ago. I'm going to train right now, I quickly reply. The girl replied with a small chuckle. 3 years of relationship, and the poor thing still did not stop getting nervous even with her. This didn't bother the black-haired woman at all, as the face she put on made her look adorable. He continued speaking. See how is everything for tonight? I ask, sounding uncertain. The smile that the woman had became even bigger when she heard her partner's question. It had been a long time since they both shared a weekend. Tonight, finally, both will be able to have time for each other. We have the reservation, he said with a blush on his cheeks. Really? The reddish man asked incredulously. Apparently the current owner was saved by a hero who graduated from the US, explained the black-haired woman. It's a relief, he said, feeling a big thought disappear. I'm sorry you had to take care of it, he apologized. Okay, I know that if you had time, you would do it, smiled softly the black-haired woman. Being the #1 hero was tedious. The worst part was, of course, Izuku having to look for an apartment very, very far away from so many cameras that he had to endure day by day. The fact that the green-haired man was shy by nature made things worse. Time was something Deku needed more than ever. Having so many responsibilities, her boyfriend didn't even have time to breathe. Run away from the paparazzi, be a full-time hero, and attend important meetings in the pro-heroes society. So, although he can't see it, Yaoyorozu knew that Izuku was smiling from the other side, not the way the green-haired man smiles at all his fans or cameras, a smile that only she knew. I have to hang up, I'll pick you up or, suggested the red-haired man. That would be fine, replied the black-haired woman. He was speechless. 3 years of relationship, and it's still difficult for her to say. The woman let out a giggle. With her defects and everything, Yaoyorozu had learned to love the red-haired man. Goodbye, Izuku, I love you, he said from the heart. I love you too, replied her lover without fear. He might be shy, but when it came to expressing his feelings, Izuku didn't hide anything. Her chest felt warm. It wasn't the first time her boyfriend had told her, but every time he did, the black-haired woman felt an indescribable security and conformity. Hanging up the call, Yaoyorozu prepared for another day of work with a smile. Being a hero was hard work after all. With Izuku, on the beach of the city, the #1 hero was smiling at the ocean. Whenever he finished exercising, Izuku would watch the sunrise. His dreams had come true, and best of all, on the long road he had to travel, he was always accompanied. Luckily for him, most of them were good people. Among those people, Momo stood out with large letters for the red-haired man. You did it, son, said a winged voice of his. Thanks to you. He continued to look at the horizon. All might. He turned to look at his teacher with a smile. The image of his predecessor smiled at him with joy, only to disappear a few seconds later. He may not be with him anymore, but Izuku will always remember him as the one responsible for all the fantastic experiences he had. He owed him his life and more. If he had never chosen him as his successor, Izuku would never have entered the US. That meant not knowing his current friends, not having learned so many things that he didn't even know existed, seeing unimaginable places. I wouldn't have met her, added the red-haired man with a smile. The relationship they both had was quite similar to the one they had in high school, to tell the truth, with the small but extremely important detail of mutual love. Something so insignificant had managed to keep them together for 3 years. Of course, in order to reach such a perfect balance, many things had happened before that could meet again. Izuku began to count the most important ones. Recount. From that day that the red-haired man left his hometown, Izuku's chaotic life full of causalities came to an end. In his place, the bourgeois lifestyle took over his life. In his trainings to behave like a gentleman, The environment made him think of Momo for a long time. Having already clarified and arranged everything between them, the green-haired man decides to call his partner and ask for advice or recommendations about his current situation. He did not regret it. The black-haired woman was more than happy to be able to help him. It was these types of matters that fascinated her friend. Listening to how she spent hours explaining in great detail how she should do something, Izuku loved it. It felt like before things were going back to the way they were before. Once accustomed to the elegant and refined surroundings of the different institutions he visited, Izuku managed to fit in wherever he traveled. All thanks to her. Unfortunately, like him, Momo also had plans for her future, so her calls began to stop. The first year of his journey was very hard for the green-haired man, always having to go from place to place, although it was also quite convenient. The boy had seen so many places and met so many people, although that was another story. The second important event he remembered was the call she gave him at midnight, informing him that his father had died. Izuku did not hesitate to suggest pausing his odyssey in order to visit her. Momo turned down the offer. As much as I needed in those moments, the black-haired woman did not want to be an obstacle for him. After that sad event, the two distanced themselves for a while. The red-haired man understood that he had already lost someone important once. In those times, Izuku used tragedy as motivation to work twice as hard. As always, Yue was at the top thanks to him. It was thanks to that the boy managed to save a lot of time that could have turned into years of heavy travel. After 2 years of traveling, Izuku was able to return to his city. His reunion with Momo was quite weird. Maybe the fact that her friend looked totally the same as the last time she saw her surprised her a bit, or maybe it was because of the chestnut in one of his arms. Izuku had to admit, Uraraka looked too beautiful, the slight change in her voice that made her sound more mature, her face that reflected her personality, and the curves that attracted his masculine side. It made it impossible for him not to blush when she threw herself into his arms to receive him. Their relationship started from scratch as total strangers, although it didn't take long until the two were treated again as before. It helped that they were both office mates. Apparently Sir had grown up in an incredible way in the world of heroes. Yaoyorozu had been working for them for a year now. Not everything was rosy. Uraraka had literally dragged his friend on a date, much to the displeasure of the black-haired woman. Izuku had completely forgotten the promise he had made to the brunette in his farewell letter to make matters even worse. The date had gone wonderfully. And that's how a year of dating with Uraraka began. They had good moments. Even Izuku came to feel love for a while. However, Yaoyorozu was not going to sit idly by. Izuku knew that Momo had nothing against Uraraka, but every time Momo called him when they were working, he could notice how it changed his way of responding and his attitude. As the year went by, the three of them began to date each other, sometimes ending awkwardly, other times enjoying every second of it. Izuku was already sure of his feelings for 3 years now. However, the red-haired man could not deny a relationship to his brunette friend. Don't get it wrong, Izuku wasn't someone who played with someone's feelings, much less a friend as close as Uraraka. If the red-haired man decided to be with her, it was because he felt it was the right thing to do and also because he didn't have the heart to reject her. His relationship with Uraraka was what you could say as magical. All those novels that Momo had read to him seemed to come true thanks to the chestnut. However, their courtship did not last more than 3 months, with her being the one who ended him, explaining that she knew that he would never reciprocate her. Despite that, Uraraka wanted to know what it felt like to be in a relationship with him. Green-haired and brown-haired remained friends. Something said to Izuku that if Momo had never approached him, he and Uraraka would have been destined to be together. Leaving that aside, the boy lowered his head while smiling silly. The day he and Momo officially became a couple went by far different from an ordinary statement. They could both feel it that morning, each one prepared in their own way, a practical one in the mirror with its reflection, which was redder than a tomato. Yaoyorozu read all the novels he had, looking for the perfect line he would use. So much practice and preparation just to give each other a good morning and start working. They hadn't spoken all day, each turning to look at the other from time to time, wondering if it was a good time to declare themselves. To complicate matters, Izuku was promoted to professional hero that morning, which means total independence. No more hours of working in the office, Yaoyorozu had to tell him now or never. At the end of their day's work, they both went in silence to take the train, a habit they both had. Some fans of the green-haired man recognized him and cornered him to ask for signatures or photos. Momo was not bothered at all. Izuku had become famous since his first year after all. Although seeing how some teenagers and even women hugged their friend with total confidence if it caused him a little discomfort, Izuku noticed this and decided to escape from the stalking with the black-haired woman. With the help of the boy's quirk, the duo left the station and began to move above the roofs of the city, much to Momo's discomfort. Arriving at the black-haired woman's apartment, or rooftop, Izuku was ready to express his feelings. He had waited 3 years to be able to tell her. The boy took out his very battered and old notebook, and when he turned to see his friend, he was surprised that she also had a notebook, only that this one was more elegant and looked very expensive. Both laughed at the coincidence, exchanged glances, and gave each other a hug. The strength of the green-haired man made his friend be lifted above him. Neither of them noticed this, of course. Each one was focused on hugging the other with all the love he had. After finishing their embrace, Izuku carefully left the girl on the ground. The pair spent a few seconds without saying anything. She only looks full of appreciation and love. Izuku treasured the memory with great affection, and Momo began to read what he had written to the green-haired man. As he read more, the black-haired woman's face changed to a sad one. Honestly, the boy had stopped listening to her when she began to shed some tears. Dropping his notebook on the floor, the green-haired man grabbed her face and gave her a kiss that took the girl's breath away. I didn't want to continue seeing how I cried. I couldn't stand it. The elegant notebook of the black-haired woman fell to the floor next to the worn and old one of the green-haired one. Momo returned the kiss with great passion. The moment she had been waiting for so long had finally arrived. Because among geniuses, there can be no love, but among nerds, it can. Uraraka, dressed in an apron with great concentration, opens a pot full of smoke. Azui and his 2 brothers wave, smiling. Kyoka runs around smiling, appreciating her engagement ring. It has a treble clef. Ida trembles nervously as she holds a piece of paper. Itsuka prepares to strike with one of her giant hands. Todoroki bends down to pick up a piece of paper, but when you touch it, it burns. Hatsum lifts a tightening wrench with a smile. Nijire holds a tomato with a harmless smile. Hagakure lovingly embraces a bunch of roses. Ojiro walks with a slight blush on his face. Momo reads a book uneasily on how to be a good housewife. Izuku raises his fist with a look of determination. Bakugo eats a curry with noticeable annoyance. Midnight holds her whip and strokes it fondly. Ashido drinks a glass of sack with teary eyes. First Omake, Happy Mother's Day. Visit your mother? Yaoyorozu asked a little upset, stopping. Yes. It's been a while since I visited her, said with a smile the green-haired one. Is it okay with you next week? Wonder. The black-haired woman took a few seconds to answer. Here she was unpacking her things for her move into her boyfriend's apartment for Izuku to come to her with that question. So suddenly it was definitely a surprise. See, sure. I always wanted to meet her, the black-haired woman replied without thinking. The smile on Izuku's face increased. Saturday then, he said, putting his arms around his neck. Okay, feigned a smile while caressing the green-haired man's arms. I'll call Mom to let her know. He gave her a quick kiss and then went to get his cell phone, leaving Momo alone. Izuku had never told her much about her mother. The girl had a bit of guilt in that part since she had never asked him directly about her. The fact that she had never seen her worried and made her nervous. 3 years of relationship and no meeting. That was alarming in any sense. It's Izuku's mother we're talking about. He didn't have to worry. Or is it? A week later. All week the matter of visiting his mother had been on his mind for a whole week in truth. There were times when Momo wished she had an off button for her brain and thus stopped having such extreme and misplaced thoughts. You look worried, said the bubble girl from the reception. Is something wrong? Wonder. The heroine did not like to talk about her love life. However, her friend was someone she trusted. She needed someone's guidance and opinion. In addition, talking about her boyfriend's mother didn't count as gossiping. At least in his opinion. Izuku, he took his time. I invited me to visit her mother. she felt embarrassed. Don't go, the bubble girl replied immediately, her face darkened and serious. You know what they say about mothers-in-law, they do. He bit his tongue. So you're going to visit Mrs. Midoriya? Mirio joined the conversation. You don't have to be nervous. She's very kind. He smiled confidently. Do you know her? Momo asked incredulously. Of course. Sir, and so does she. He pointed to the pained secretary. Midoriya brought her once. The blonde revealed. I hate you so much, whispered the poor girl. See, how is she? The black-haired woman asked curiously. It's like Izuku, but woman. Mirio explained. Yaoyorozu's mind began to work. The image of Izuku wearing a miniskirt flashed through his head. I think I already have an idea, the black-haired woman spoke, trying to get the terrifying image out of her head. Say hello from us when you visit her. The blonde said goodbye, going through the walls as if nothing had happened. Momo didn't know whether to feel calmer or anxious. If what Mirio said was true, then she had nothing to worry about. The black-haired woman sighed with relief and began to gather her things to leave. Don't let your guard down at any time. Bubble Girl warned him. Mothers-in-law are not to be trusted, was the last thing he said. There's nothing to worry about. I ignore your warnings, the girl. Who knows? Maybe both ended up becoming good friends. If the lady was as good as they said, the visit would be a sigh for her. Time later. Are you ready? I asked, taking the green-haired man by the hand. His girlfriend nodded with a smile, then Izuku knocked on the door. Feeling safe and confident, Yaoyorozu was filled with determination and good thoughts for the meeting with the elder Midoriya. The emotion was killing her. Meeting the mother of the love of her life was an honor for her. The black-haired girl wanted to leave a good impression, to show that she was a good match. This was the perfect time. The girl swallowed hard when she heard the woman's footsteps. If everything went well, tonight Momo would sleep with all the peace of mind in the world. The door of the simple apartment opened. A short woman in casual attire and an old notary was present. The smile she wore was so maternal. With only the first impression, the black-haired woman felt that this woman was one of the most innocent living beings on earth next to Izuku, of course. Izuku! He increased his smile even more. I miss you so much, son. He approached to hug him, ignoring Yaoyorozu. I missed you too, huh? The green-haired man hugged back, feeling a little embarrassed that his girlfriend has to see him this way. Despite the fact that the girl has gone into the background, Momo could not help but smile at how similar mother and son were, both having clear problems due to displays of affection, shyness, and hair color. Apparently Izuku had taken everything from his mother. You've gotten taller. And you look more handsome than before. The lady took him by the face, carefully inspecting her son. Laughed Izuku a little uncomfortably. I'd like to introduce you to someone. She moved her mother's hands away to move away a little. Feeling the hand of the green-haired man, Momo intertwined her fingers out of habit and even supported her body a little to her partner's, letting her head rest on the boy's shoulder. I wanted to show the closeness and confidence I had with Izuku. Also, the shyness of her lover did not allow her to show signs of affection when they were in public, so she had to take advantage. This is my girlfriend. I thought it would be good for them to meet, said the red-haired man, feeling his face burn from how embarrassing it was to say that. Her mother fell for a few seconds. It seemed that the woman had not grasped or heard things well at all. Seeing how things were going, the black-haired woman decided to apply. Clearing her throat, Momo inhaled and exhaled. Good morning, Mrs. Midoriya. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Nice to meet you. She bowed with the kindest smile she had. That a legitimate daughter of the Yaoyorozu family would show such respect for a woman of standard appearance was rare to see and hard to believe. Even so, that Ochako was not your girlfriend? He asked, turning to look at his son. Completely ignoring the crouching black hair. Momo began to have a nervous tic. The girl had frozen in her position, not daring to look up because of how undervalued and insignificant she felt at that moment. His self-esteem fell to the ground. Izuku complained about how impolite that sounded. Yaoyorozu, she's the girl who broke your heart in high school? Said the woman unscrupulously. Mom, shouted the green-haired man annoyed, approaching his mother to prevent her from continuing talking. Without anyone noticing, the black-haired woman got into a fetal position in one of the corners of the corridors, an aura of depression covering her. Izuku hurriedly approached her to comfort her. Yaoyorozu could seem serene and firm on the outside. However, on the inside she was very sensitive and very easy to offend. This was going to be a long dinner. Ochako's gastronomic dilemma. Uraraka knew that she was not the best at cooking. If it weren't for her parents, the chestnut would have starved to death long ago. Simple dishes like onigiri and miso soups were the only things the girl could do, but seriously, I was tired of eating the same thing every time. Knowing how to cook was essential for a hero, or at least for one as popular as her. The average and the fans made it impossible for him to eat in restaurants or even little-known and humble stalls, so it was cooking or eating instant noodles. Honestly, Ochako had begun to develop a dislike and even disgust towards instant food, adding to the fact that her mother always told her that it was unhealthy to even think about eating that food. Speaking of her mother, the girl's first idea was to ask her if she could teach her how to cook. His response was not at all encouraging. Apparently, not having hands for the kitchen was something transcendental on the part of her mother, revealing that she only worked as an assistant in the kitchen, being her father the one who cooked and added her seasoning. After hearing this, the brunette asked his father the same question. He happily agreed. Aside. The girl shouted, coming with a fire extinguisher, pointing determinedly at the burning oven. Wait. Octree to stop her father. However, it was too late. The foam had fallen squarely on him and on the entire shelf on which they were cooking. If it hadn't been for the extinguisher running out, the chestnut stove would have been covered in white. Her father was silent for a few seconds, his entire top covered in foam. Uraraka was beginning to realize what he had done. Have you thought about ordering food delivery? He said, looking at his daughter, since the foam was all over his face. And so here we are, with a defeated chestnut, its stomach rumbling, and a bunch of spices and meats on its table. Uravity defeated by food, thought the girl. She had bought everything to prepare a buffet, but her spirits dropped instantly that she took the knife and did not know one thing of what she explained in her audiobook of Cooking for Beginners. Perhaps the fact that the guide spoke in another language had something to do with it. I really have to look at the things I buy, he lamented as he ate a Pocky trying to calm his hunger. I can't be the only one, can I? Uraraka thought, taking out her phone to make a few calls about her problem. The brunette began to feel a little more confident with herself, imagining that her friends were going through the same thing as her. None, not even Mineta. It seems that of her entire class, she was the only one suffering from famine at the moment. The fact that she was alone in this type of case made her feel even worse. Aoyama was an expert in French cuisine and had even won awards as a child, and he continued to be prestigious. Mina was not as prodigious as the previous one mentioned. Even so, the hairy woman knew how to prepare enough dishes to support herself. Uraraka didn't want to remember Tsuyu. Her friend Tsuyu, her friend Uraraka, was and won't be an expert when it came to home-cooked food. Her siblings were proof that her food was and will be delicious. Ida said something about the dishonor and what would happen if he couldn't prepare his own food. Kirishima said almost the same thing. And Kaminari and Jiro responded at the same time, both contradicting each other by saying how badly the other cooked, when in truth, they both knew enough. Uraraka refrained from calling Rikido. It was not necessary to spend his credits knowing how talented his partner was in that area. The rest of the boys ended up saying the same thing to her, except for Bakugu, who simply yelled, "What the fuck do you care?" leaving her in doubt. To make matters worse, when she decided to call her best friend to find some comfort, she answered him. Uraraka hung up immediately, not even wanting to know why Momo answered her instead of Izuku. Later we would talk about the conflict that the brunette had with a certain black-haired woman. Uraraka needed a hero that saved her from her own stomach. Music electronic. Kyoka loved Kaminari. She really did. However, that doesn't mean the dam has to make it so hard to love him. Sigh I'm sick of this, said the hairy violet tiredly, looking with a frown at the mess in front of her. When the heroine had agreed to live with the blonde, her innocent and dreamy heart, she imagined movie nights, family moments, funny scenes, dreamy breakfasts and dinners. I really had to mature in that aspect. His apartment was a mess, always having to clean and search through the mounds of garbage for his things. The word privacy had been eliminated from the girl's vocabulary, and she couldn't even use the shower by herself even once, or use the bathroom in general. Not even on the sex side did she feel comfortable. Every time she tried to seduce her dense and silly boyfriend, he always ended up laughing at how ridiculous she looked when she tried to be sensual, not as hyperactive as in high school. Is there nothing good about living with this man? How was it that his parents could even stand it? She wondered incredulously. Love. I've arrived, Kaminari said melodiously, entering his apartment. His patience reached a limit. She was going to talk, and he would listen to her. Otherwise, the blonde would sleep in a hotel tonight. Denki. The violet-hairy woman called him furiously, taking one of his bases so that he could use it as a weapon. How you don't know how much I miss you today? The boy smiled happily. Oh, real? Said the heroine sarcastically, hiding her base behind. All I wanted was to come and see you. He continued to sound playful. I don't think that's true. Kyuka pointed to the clock to his right, which showed 11 o'clock at night. Sorry, I made a few stops before I came, by the way. I hope you didn't eat anything because I was invited to a party and I thought it was perfect for I'm not going. I'm not going, replied dryly, and neither do you. He used his quirk to close the door. But you don't understand. This will be great for us after you. The blonde wanted to explain himself. His attitude was still positive. I said no. The girl shouted furiously. The echo of her voice was heard throughout the place. A tense silence occurred for a few seconds. Despite this, Kaminari remained positive about his girlfriend's attitude. Listen, there's no need to argue. Let's fix this and then let's go relax at the party, okay? Believe me, after whatever I asked you, I think we should break up, Kyuka said, his mind clouded with anger. Kaminari's infectious smile faded. Despair began to take hold of him. What are you talking about? I asked, not believing what the blonde was hearing. From us idiots. That's what I'm talking about. She took out her violet hair, holding back the urge to hit her soon-to-be ex-boyfriend. Look at our apartment. I can't go on living like this. Advertisement. Point to his girlfriend. Lately he hadn't been the cleanest and most careful of the bride and groom. But everything had an explanation, and once she heard it, everything would be solved. I understand that the department is a disaster. I admit it's my fault, but if it's your fault, why do I have to be the one to solve your problems? He pointed his base at the blonde. Let me explain. The reason I was careless in that aspect was for a cause. He lost his patience a little. So I will talk about it tomorrow. Now I want to be alone. Del Rubio passed to open the door. It took Kaminari a few seconds to understand what his girlfriend meant by those words. You can't be serious, he thought, not believing his eyes. Are you kicking me out? The boy asked incredulously. You said you had to go. To a party or not? Question, why don't you go and relax a little? And I'm going to be busy cleaning. Her voice began to break a little. Are you serious? The blonde asked, annoyed. Just go. He opened the door even more for him to leave. Kaminari looked at the exit, then his girlfriend. After giving the girl a look of contempt, he left the apartment. Good. I'll go to the party alone. I hope you have fun cleaning too. He said outside, making a gesture with his clothes to look more annoyed. He shouted before throwing his base at the blonde, who barely managed to dodge it. Maybe I will. But next to someone who is not as angry as you. I shout before starting to leave. I wish you luck **, sniff **. He slammed the door shut, no longer wanting to hear Denki's hurtful words. Managing to hear his voice breaking, the blonde turned around and prepared to apologize and return things to normal. However, the door was already closed. The sobs of the woman he loved could be heard from outside. Letting out a sigh, the boy began to move away from the door, not having enough strength to be able to talk to her after making her cry. While Kyuka hugged her knees, alone in her apartment, Denki went down the elevator of the building while looking with sadness and guilt at the golden ring with a treble clef in her hands. Temperate. Shudo was walking through the streets of the city with total tranquility. Of course he did this dressed as if he were a prisoner wanted by all the nations of the world, since lately, The ambushes of his fan club had become more frequent and dangerous. Remembering how once the poor guy was sedated in the middle of one of his morning runs, only to wake up with only his underwear, some of it to be honest, tied to a tree full of kisses and scratches on various parts of his body. The traumatizing memory ran through a chill like never before for Shudo, curious that despite having an ice quirk he can still feel this kind of experience. Arriving at a more secluded part of the city, a shiny artifact on the ground caught the boy's attention, forgetting the danger he was in at all times. Shudo bent down to see what it was. His eyes widened when he saw that it was a coin. Oh, but not just any coin. It was a coin with his face. On one side was his cold side, and on the other you could see his scar with the characteristic red hair. Shudo sweated cold. Unable to move by the impression, the hero hesitated in what his next move would be. However, when he decided that locking himself in a dome of ice was his best option, a dart fell on his left shoulder. Before he could even burn or freeze the dart, a shower of darts fell on his other limbs and part of his chest. Todoroki fell asleep instantly. Shortly after, a bunch of girls with white and red hair approached the unconscious boy and took him away as if nothing had happened. Another normal day for young Shudo. I repeat that it is not necessary to read what is below. Uraraka trembles in fear as she sees her plate of food move. Azui watches his brother asleep on the food table. Kyoka now looks brightly at wedding-themed invitations. Ida fumes from how fast she writes. Itsuka covers her blushing face with her giant hands. Todoroki bends down to tie his shoes, but they burn. Hatsum holds a screwdriver with his face dirty from an explosion. Nijire is now holding a carrot. Hagakure hugs a small teddy bear toy. Ojiro walks faster, as if he were fleeing. Momo holds a hand exhaler in amazement. Izuku holds up a briefcase of teachers. Bakugo washes his dirty dishes wildly. Midnight continues to stroke his whip. Ashido now drinks from the bottle. Uraraka, dressed in an apron with great concentration, opens a pot full of smoke. Azui and his two brothers wave, smiling. Kyoka runs around smiling, appreciating her engagement ring. It has a treble clef. Ida trembles nervously as she holds a piece of paper. Itsuka prepares to strike with one of her giant hands. Todoroki bends down to pick up a piece of paper, but when you touch it, it burns. Hatsum lifts a tightening wrench with a smile. Nijire holds a tomato with a harmless smile. Hagakure lovingly embraces a bunch of roses. Ojiro walks with a slight blush on his face. Momo reads a book uneasily on how to be a good housewife. Izuku raises his fist with a look of determination. Bakugo eats a curry with noticeable annoyance. Midnight holds her whip and strokes it fondly. Ashido drinks a glass of sack with teary eyes. Happy Mother's Day. Second part. Dialing numbers at incredible speed on his cell phone, Yaoyorozu prayed to the heavens that the person he was calling would answer him. Things went in the worst possible way. The introduction that she imagined would go wonderfully ended up becoming a big fiasco. Having to excuse himself to use the bathroom as soon as he had spent a second inside the woman's small apartment, causing a strange look from the lady. "Hello," answered the call, lighting up the black-haired woman's face when she heard her voice. "Tsuyu." "Thank God." The girl felt grateful. "I need your C-tips now more than ever." I inform him. When it came to interpersonal issues, Azui was by far the most experienced and mature of all her acquaintances, something that admired and frustrated the black-haired woman a little, because it showed her how far she had to go to become independent in this aspect. "Is it about Midoriya? Did you have an argument?" I ask, trying to deduce the problem. No. Izuku and I are fine. It's about his mother," Yaoyorozu revealed, starting to whisper. "What's with her?" I ask, not understanding what he meant. "I think she hates me," said the girl, not sure of herself. "What you tell me seems impossible to me," her friend immediately replied. "I know Inko well. She couldn't hate someone even if she tried," she said. He even calls her by her first name. Though feeling even smaller, the black-haired woman, was it that she was the only one that woman didn't like? Momo? Izuku called him worriedly, knocking on the door a couple of times. "Are you feeling well?" "Wonder." Saying goodbye in a whisper from Tsuyu, The girl put away her cell phone and took a deep breath before answering. I'm fine. I'll be out in a few minutes, don't worry, replied to the black-haired woman with a tone that was too fake. The boy knew that this was not true. For his girlfriend, being discredited and undervalued was the worst of the penalties, increasing the fact of how sensitive she was to insults and provocations. Izuku couldn't help but worry. Well, Mom asked me to go buy some things at the store. I inform her. I won't take long, I promise, the red-haired man assured him. What was missing? Yaoyorozu cursed his luck, sighing and slamming his forehead with the door. All chances of achieving a family bond with Izuku's mother had gone down the drain. How was it possible for him to compose himself after their first meeting? She needed her partner's support now more than ever. Unfortunately, his mother had already beaten her to it. Please don't delay too long, the black-haired woman asked, sounding more like a prayer. I won't, I know it's asking too much, but, replied the red-haired man firmly, try to get along with Mom, okay? She doesn't usually say those things, he explained. In fact, all she knew about the woman were mostly positive things or good impressions. Nothing compared to what she had just experienced a few moments ago. One thing more, Izuku continued speaking. Don't lock yourself in the bathroom. Until I come back, he smiled nervously. A giggle escaped the girl. She really could not imagine a life without him. Opening the door wide enough, the black-haired woman stuck her head out so she could see her partner. I'll be fine, she said, looking at him more calmly than before. The green-haired man smiled as he exhaled calmly, his hand resting on his girlfriend's cheek, tenderly caressing her face. If there was one thing Momo loved about Izuku, it was how incredibly tender and caring he could be. Despite being a tough-looking muscular giant, the boy never lost his innocence and shyness completely. The black-haired woman was grateful that he didn't. Approaching the green-haired man, the girl put her arms around her boyfriend's neck and got into a more comfortable position while looking at him with a twinkle in her eyes. Izuku understood what his partner wanted to achieve and attracted his face to give him a kiss. No matter how many times they did it, the boy always lost track of time when he felt Momo's lips. On the black-haired woman's side, her kisses always made her forget all her problems and dilemmas, forcing her to think about nothing, but this time was no exception. Completely closing the short distance between them, the girl deepened the kiss while caressing her partner's curls. The heat began to take over Izuku, and the boy gave himself the confidence to lift his girlfriend by the legs to facilitate their kissing session. Both were between caresses and kisses until, Izuku, before you go. Inko stopped short, covering his face with clear discomfort. The young couple turned pale. Parting at an incredible speed, the pair began to mend their messy clothes while trying to breathe normally since the previous touch had left them panting. What did you say, Mama? Asked Red as Tomato, the green-haired one. I forgot to ask you for the butter, her mother informed her, avoiding eye contact. Butter. The tea will bring it right away. The boy shot out of the apartment, probably thanks to his quirk. The two most important women for Izuku had been left alone, one looking at the floor not even daring to breathe, the other looking uncomfortably at his son's girlfriend. Seriously, nothing can get worse. Come with me to the kitchen, Yaoyorozu, I'd like to have a chat with you, he said with a smile, although his tone of voice seemed irritated and even annoyed. I had to speak. The girl followed the woman tremblingly, wishing that the earth would swallow her up. Ochako's Gastronomic Dilemma, second part. Uraraka asked for a hero, and a hero would have. As if by magic, the doorbell of her apartment rang repeatedly, and the tired and exhausted brunette got up like a zombie to go see who it was. Whoever it is has no patience, she thought irritably, opening the door heavily. The girl was tackled by a shock force that made her see her life pass in seconds. Ochako! Nijire called to him above her, raising her arms as she was so excited to see her old friend again. Ochako was also happy to see her, but she could not tell because of such a level of power that she had thrown at her. If there was one thing that characterized her friend, it was her little delicacy that she had, at least with her. Uraraka tried to wave at him. However, it was difficult for him to breathe with the weight of the girl on top of him. The brunette gave up. I was passing by here, and I remembered that you lived nearby. So I decided to go and say hello. His smile couldn't be more radiant. The stretched girl let out a scream of pain in response to what her friend was telling her. Not having eaten anything was really affecting him. "Tell me, Ochako, how you are?" I ask, bending down a little to see the weak girl. Hunger was the only thing the brunette could say. Her stomach growled, and the poor thing fell unconscious. The voice and confused face of her friend were the last thing Ochako saw before everything went dark. Sometime later, the delicious smell of fried foods woke the sleepy brunette all at once, drawing her in as if she were spellbound by such an aroma. As she got closer to her kitchen, someone's humming became clearer. As she entered her kitchen, Uraraka was surprised to see Nijire Hadu wearing an apron and a scarf on her head, cooking as if she were born for it. "Do you want to try some?" asked without even turning to look at her friend. Her hands were still handling the spices with dexterity. The girl said something incomprehensible while she saw with predatory eyes the plate full of fried fish that Nijire was holding. A little drool fell out. "You can have these, but not these yet." He pointed to a container full of much more fish. Uraraka wasted no time and snatched the dish from her friend. The brunette didn't even use cutlery to eat. She just put her mouth to the plate and began to devour each of the steaks without stopping. Barely a minute had passed and the plate was empty. "Well, how is it?" Nijire asked with a smile. The girl kneeled down suddenly and hit her head on the ground. Taking a big breath of air, the heroine screamed. "Please teach me how to cook," he said, feeling tears coming from his eyes. Nijire was perplexed for a few seconds. Her smile faded as she looked strangely at her friend. However, the girl knelt down at the height of the chestnut and responded. "Of course." His smile came back bigger than ever. Uraraka raised her face as tears continued to flow. Both shared a hug, and while Nijire did her best to calm her friend, the girl had finally found someone who would help her not go hungry anymore. "You're bleeding, by the way," said her friend in the middle of the hug, a little worried that she would die from blood loss. Uraraka's training was about to begin. Electronic music. Part 2. Lifting heavily, Kyuka stretched uncomfortably on her bed, turning to see the empty space on the big bed, the hairy violet sighing melancholy. "Maybe I'm a little too much," she thought guiltily. Taking her cell phone on her bedside table, the girl hesitated whether or not to call Denki. Swallowing her pride, the heroine was ready to dial her number. However, there was no hurry. After breakfast, the hairy woman thought. Heading to the kitchen to see what she could eat, the girl stopped in her tracks. He was in charge of the shopping, he recalled before even entering the kitchen. I guess he wasn't useless after all. Dressing casually for shopping, the girl left her apartment feeling empty. It had been a long time since the girl had felt lonely or bored in her life. Kaminari could be an idiot, however, he was her idiot. Like his quirk, the boy always lit things up and lit things up. His positive and joking attitude perfectly complemented Kyuka's way of being. They were handsome poles in almost every aspect, and even so, she had decided to go so far in a relationship with him. Accepting to live together was a big step, and maybe he too had difficulties just like her. Perhaps he must have listened to it at night. The thoughts in her head were so many that the violet-haired woman didn't realize that she was already in front of the mini-market where Denki normally went to shop. Make no mistake, being heroes gave them good funding. However, they both had humble roots, preferring to spend money on other things, a good low in Jiro's case. Sighing, the girl walked into the store with her sad face, wondering how she would have felt to go shopping with Denki. "I bet it would have been fun," she said with a smile. Not a day had passed, and the blonde was already so needed. Kyuka? I call a voice known from behind. "Q, what are you doing here?" Kaminari asked nervously. The violet-haired girl turned slowly. Denki looked terrible, the smell of alcohol was noticeable, and her clothes were dirty and worn. It seems that she was not the only one who had a bad time last night. "Hello." The girl greeted him, feeling intimidated by the blonde's intense gaze. "I came to buy something for breakfast. I take random products. I thought that was my duty." He pointed to a cart full of everything they always bought. Kyuka swallowed. Despite the fact that he was in such conditions and the heated argument last night, the idiot remembered the only responsibility he had. Sigh I'm sorry, the red-haired woman apologized, lowering her gaze to avoid embarrassment. To know that I don't have much patience and that sometimes I'm scolding, she began to tell her defects. Kaminari listened attentively as Kyoka belittled herself incessantly. If she had spoken to him in such a way before, the boy would have died of laughter and told him how sentimentalist he was. However, this was not the occasion. Enough is enough, he said, clenching his fists full of determination. I love you just the way you are, flaws and all, he revealed. The girl was dumbfounded at the blonde's words. The boy's eyes shone as if it were his quirk. Kyoka wanted to say something, but Kaminari seemed not to have finished speaking. What I'm going to ask of you is a lot, but I promise that I'm willing to change if you accept. The boy kneeled in front of her. But what? Kyokaju, please marry me. The blonde shouted at the top of his lungs, lowering his head while showing him the ring. At first the blonde thought it was a joke, just like all the others that the blonde liked to do. I can't imagine life without you. If you reject me, it's fine. I understand. I deserve it for being an idiot. I stopped for a moment to breathe. Denk it is, the girl tried to pronounce a word. Seeing how the woman of his dreams, sometimes nightmares, approached him slowly made the blonde's heart go 1,000 miles an hour. It even seems that his quirk is helping him to have a cardiac arrest. Is it a joke? Kyoka shouted annoyed, using her quirk to send her partner flying against the door of the mini-market. I love you too. Kaminari shouted internally, rising in pain from the great shockwave. Of all the places you had to propose yourself in a supermarket? He made a gesture with his arms, and to top it all off, a mini? She cried irritably. Is that a yes? The blonde asked, frightened and pained. Saito, what do you think, idiot? Replied the red-haired woman with a reddened face. Kaminari's smile and characteristic charisma returned to his body as if by magic, getting up to hug his now wife with all his strength. Ga! The violet-haired woman screamed in pain, feeling the electricity flow through her body. I'm going to make you the happiest woman in the world. He stopped his embrace when he saw his unconscious girlfriend in his arms. Kyoka? I called to him, moving her a little. It was going to be a complicated marriage. Cheer up, Mina, the love story of Ojiro and Hagakure. And then she came to look for me in the classroom, and all my students began to embarrass us, her friend said fantastically. What envy! I wish my boyfriend would do the same for me, Ashido complained sadly. Imashireo is not my boyfriend. Still, said the girl embarrassedly, your boyfriend? Did you get someone? Who? She asked curiously. His name is, the hairy girl made a bit of drama, Sake? He revealed with a small laugh at the end. The girl pulled out a bottle of alcohol from under her pillow, hugging and kissing her while holding the cell phone with little delicacy. Don't you think it's time to end Sake and find someone else? Hagakure asked sadly. Never. There's no one like him in the whole world. He opened the bottle and took out a glass of your pillow too. Maybe it's because it's a bottle, said her friend in a low voice. You're jealous. That's it. He hugged his bottle even tighter. Ugh, how come you can drink so much? It's horrible, he recalled the first time he tried the drink. The problem was you, not him. Ashido continued to deny, helping himself a little. We are still young, Mina. You don't have to be sad about not having a partner at our age. Mashireo and I are an example, he explained. The mood of the hairy girl dropped, happily. Alcohol was responsible for keeping her happy. The fun and energetic personality of the girl faded when she remembered the fact that she was alone. That's where the drink came in. Sake and I will have a date. I'll call you later. Ashido said goodbye, hanging up the call immediately. Wait, Hagakure tried to stop her but to no avail. She really felt sorry for her friend. She who talked so much about having a partner since high school was the one who had taken the most effort to attract the attention of her classmates. However, none paid attention to her. Apparently, Mina couldn't stand the fact that all her friends have someone in their lives. So one random day he decided to drown his sorrows in alcohol. The girl was not an alcoholic, not at all, at least in that aspect. The hairy one had some control, making sure to only drink when it suits her best, mostly on weekends. The excuse to drink because she liked it was obviously false. At least when she drank, the girl was surrounded by friends from her work, making her feel that she was not yet completely alone. I have to get her a boyfriend, thought Hagakure, leaning back on her pink bed. The vibration of her cell phone the sack of her thoughts, forcing her to see who the hell was talking to her at 11 o'clock at night. Hi Toru, I'm sorry to write to you so late, but the principal asked me to remind you that tomorrow it's your turn with Class A, the girl read. Making excuses to have to talk to me. I guess we're not that close yet. Hagakure thought innocently, beginning to write him a message. Thanks for letting me know, Mashireo. I don't know what I would do without you, replied the heroine with a laugh. On the other hand, Ojiro felt a blush at the same time that he swallowed heavily. That's how she is. Don't get her wrong, he said to himself, holding back the feeling of responding in the same way as his friend. There's no point, that's what coworkers are for, right? His smile diminished as he read Toru. So you want to go slow? Well, I'm not in a hurry, the girl thought as if she were meditating. He had always had an interest in Ojiro since high school, and both remained very close friends. However, neither of them decided to take a step beyond that friend's zone in which they both were. But fate would bring them together once again. I'm glad we are working together, Mashireo. Do you think if tomorrow we go for a walk after work? Toru sent the message, along with an emoticon with a smile. Meanwhile, with Ojiro, you have to buy supplies for the week. You also had to make a week report for the director, whom the hero recalled as he analyzed the text that his friend had sent him. He definitely wouldn't go. I had to be strong and tell him no, and then he started writing. I would love to. I didn't have anything planned for this weekend, the boy sent with tears in his eyes. Toru's heart jumped with happiness when he received the message. Perhaps it will take his time, but both had many years of work at the academy, where they now teach. Unlike a few years ago, they were now teaching the younger generations of heroes. She would wait for him. They were still young after all. Returning to Mina. Who needs a boyfriend? To have a partner was to lose your freedom, arguments over ridiculous things, problems with the time you have to give him. All nonsense. She didn't want to be a slave, much less a dependent person. No, sir. As long as Mina Ashido breathes, you will never commit. And I will never marry. The girl shouted at the top of her lungs, raising her bottle in the air. Although he was always curious, you know why some people do look happy being in a relationship didn't make sense to her. Sacrificing so much for one person seemed stupid to him, but even Yaoyorozu had a boyfriend. She was the smartest of all her high school classmates. But if it was the green-haired Adonis, Mina would have sacrificed everything for a night with him. You had to give credit to the black-haired woman. The girl kept the jewel of Class A anyway. Ashido needed answers, and together with his faithful companion Sake, he would find them. Starting with the oldest couple, the hairy woman took her cell phone and dialed the number of a certain purple-haired woman. While she waited for her to answer, the girl drank 3 or 4 glasses of the concoction. Hello. Jiro replied with a happy tone. Classic and soft rock could be heard in the background. I have a question. The girl went at once. Ashido? Something happened? I'm a little busy now. The violet-haired woman spoke between giggles. Kaminari's voice could be heard nearby. Are you happy with your relationship? Asked the girl, a little uncomfortable listening to the whispers that the blonde made. To be honest, no, Kyuka replied a little more calmly. Tanky. Give it back to me. Complain the movie, annoyed. Mina looked at her cell phone surprised for a few seconds, trying to guess what the hell was happening with those two. It was not after a few seconds of hearing footsteps and giggles that someone answered her again. Okay. I lied *sigh* if I'm happy with my relationship. Denki may be an idiot, but he's my idiot, said the violet-haired woman. But why? Explain it to me, demanded answers the hairy one. Hello? I call, realizing that no one answered anymore. I'm sorry I have to hang up. Is it a visitor? The girl replied unsurely, It's time to make heirs women. Kaminari shouted in the distance. The static sound of the missed call was the next thing Mina heard. Seriously, that call was a waste of time. In the end, Jiro hadn't answered him anything. The hairy sighed, irritated, and drank another glass of sake. Second attempt. She looked in her contacts for the red-haired man she drooled so much about. She was not ashamed. Mina was sure that half of the city also sighed for the boy. Although there was one person who had more admirers than Deku, and it was another boy with whom the hairy woman fantasized. Unstable fire. Opening the door of his home, Shudo caught the attention of all his relatives. They all let out a sound of surprise when they saw the conditions in which the boy arrived. "Is everything okay, brother?" asked his elder sister, seeing his half-naked younger brother pass by. "I don't want to talk about it," he replied without even turning to look at him. Shudo simply went to his room without saying a word. "It's be fine," I answer, a little confused and terrified his sister. It was the first time that her brother arrived home half-naked. Normally he always wore at least one garment, although lately it seems that the attacks of his admirers have become more frequent and extreme. "You should give a lecture to prevent this from happening to you again," he said loud enough for Shudo to hear. "It would be very dangerous. They are well equipped," he replied from a distance. And I see, he continued to feel bad for his brother. His popularity with women would kill him one of these days. The boy returned to the living room with new clothes and poured himself some tea from his sister's jug. Sighing tired, the boy began to meditate a little until, "You have something on your face." Her sister came over to take it off. "What the hell is this?" He saw a tiny tracker in a circular shape. "Oh no," said the boy, feeling his soul go out. All the doors of the house of her home opened at the same time, Japanese house, revealing a lot of girls of all ages with hair painted red and white. One of the offenders, who had a scar identical to the one Shudo, took a few steps forward. Shudo Todoroki. Alias, passionate as fire and cold as snow, you are surrounded by no way to escape. Give up, and you can stay awake. I point a dart gun at him. This is bad. Shudo thought, putting himself in a defensive position as he looked around seriously. There are a lot of them. No matter ice or fire, I won't be able to evade all their shots. He told himself mentally, seeing that there was no way to get out unscathed. I needed assistance, his father. This time I won't go anywhere. My father Endeavor is on his way. And he doesn't like the press invading his home. He smiled triumphantly. Hee, it seems that I win this time. I looked directly at the leader of the group. It's only a matter of time and... You mean that guy? The girl stepped aside. Behind her, Endeavor was tied up and unconscious, along with another group of girls. I give up. The boy immediately raised his hands, cursing his useless father with all his being. His sister saw how the group of girls tied and carried Shudo as if he were an emperor. For some reason, his father was also carried in the same way. We'll bring them at 10. Here's our card. The leader shook her hand, and then walked away with the loot. Thank you? He received the card, which had his brother's face on each side. If you like it, we would like you to join our humble cause. We always believed that Shudo would like to be called Oniai-sama, he explained. Hello, will I think about it? He replied, not knowing what else to say. We'll wait for your answer. We'll see you, he said, going to the exit. Thank heaven I never decided to be a hero. Tsunderas are the best. Tetsutisu wasn't the one to talk about women, let alone relationships. The boy was characterized by being dense and hard as iron. With the females, however, the boy could tell when someone wasn't being totally honest with him, in this case honest. And I told you I did it because I found them irritating. Kendo shouted at him without stopping at any time to look him in the face. But there are guys who also bully you, and you don't do anything. Even girls. The boy complained, clearly disgusted. It's different, silly. He replied, deigning to turn around, a slight blush on his face. I really couldn't understand women, or at least to this one. All his admirers seemed to be happy when he simply treated them as he thought proper, and they all always said the same thing to him. Gentlemanly, polite. What a man. The latter brought a smile to the albino's face. However, why was it always this way with her fans that her friend ended up losing her temper and sending the poor girls flying in one fell swoop? It was definitely a special case. In what way? Sai, I would really like to understand you, said the boy tiredly. Why, I don't treat my fans the same way you do. I treat you, or do I? He made a gesture with his hips. Well, I'd like you to treat me like them, said the albino in a low voice, remembering that he was always adorable in front of the cameras. What did you say? The heroine screams annoyed, activating her quirk and hitting her friend hard, drawing the attention of everyone around. This had already become a habit for them, that she sends him against the wall, into heaven, buries him in the ground, or simply crushes him with both hands. A comment that affected the orange-haired woman and Tetsu could be considered dead. The worst of all was that the boy couldn't activate his quirk because its harshness could hurt his friend. You should be thankful that you have special treatment. Idiot. He took resounding steps. The people in the subway stared at him. Seriously, I felt that each time his punches were stronger than the previous one, but that was not the point. Why did he alone have to be treated this way? None of his other friends had to endure this. One of these days the albino would have to have a talk with Kendo. I was beginning to suspect that she hated it. Tsuyu is not to be trifled with. Jumping from roof to roof, our dear little frog was doing her morning-night patrol. Although unlike other nights, this time the girl had an answering machine in her ear. Remember to add salt to the soup and be careful when doing so. You could burn yourself if you don't wear gloves, Tsuyu told him. I know how it's done. Just call to ask when I should kick him out, his younger brother said irritably. Wait a minute, I have to attend to something. He put his call on hold when he saw a silhouette in the night. Good evening, Froppy, we were waiting for you, said a deep and mysterious voice hidden in the shadows of a water tank. A shadow moved like a snake across the floor and then began to take on a human form with a crow's head. High above Tsuyu, the shadow of a huge bird began to cover him. Finally, in the distance through the streets of the city, an individual was swinging from building to building with the help of a type of paper. Now that you are here, we can start our weekly meeting, report the members of the Watchmen. Fumikage ordered. A huge hawk landed on the roofs with a great sound that would paralyze even the bravest of heroes. Koji carefully lowered the back of the huge bird. This is cellophane, she said, falling to the building along with the rest of Zero, after doing a great pirouette of course. Finally, there is me, Tsukuyami. He released the fearsome dark shadow Fumikage, who surrounded him and then crossed his arms, egocentric. Let's start it. One moment. Tsuyu stopped him, moving away a little to answer the call. What's wrong? He asked his brother. Everyone present stared at their partner with a bit of disappointment. The air of epicness that had been created disappeared completely. The dark shadow sighed tiredly and pretended to see the time. Even the hawk began to groom itself. After a few seconds, the girl returned to the circle they had formed. I'm sorry, Tokoyomi continues, Froppy spoke. Ihem, Tsukuyami, but well. He corrected him a little embarrassed. As I said, wait. Mineta shouted, entering through the door of the roof, tired and sweaty. Don't start without me. He fell on his knees. Everyone made a growl of annoyance when they heard their irritating companion. The hawk flew away, and dark shadow hid in his companion's body. Mineta, this is the third time this week, complained Zero, taking off his helmet to see the little man. But I thought they had already accepted me. Tsuyu voted for them to let me in. I hugged the girl. I wasn't even there on the day of the vote. He hit him with his tongue, forcing him away. Be well, Koji, if you vote for me. He approached his shy friend. It was a Bodo against one. Besides, you don't even care about the safety of the streets of this city. You just want to be in the paper. Fumikage betrayed him. The boy took out a newspaper from among his things in which the whole group appeared in the headline of that day, all having very original poses and in color. Give please. Who wants to be in that cheap newspaper? Enough. You can stay, but that doesn't mean you're part of the group. Fumikage shouted annoyedly, now we'll start winging. Wait a minute. Tsuyu stopped him again. Fumicage's cry of despair was heard throughout the city that night. I repeat that it is not necessary to read what is below. Uraraka trembles in fear as she sees her plate of food move. Azui watches his brother asleep on the food table. Kyoka now looks brightly at wedding-themed invitations. Ida fumes from how fast she writes. Itsuka covers her blushing face with her giant hands. Todoroki bends down to tie his shoes, but they burn. Hatsum holds a screwdriver with his face dirty from an explosion. Nijire is now holding a carrot. Hagakure hugs a small teddy bear toy. Ojiro walks faster, as if he were fleeing. Momo holds a hand exhaler in amazement. Izuku holds up a briefcase of teachers. Bakugo washes his dirty dishes wildly. Midnight continues to stroke his whip. Ashido now drinks from the bottle. When one talked about Yaoyorozu Momo, one could not define her with a single word. She had several virtues,